The Book of Daniel, the End Times Prophet. Chapter 1, the Captivity and the Test. The year is 605 BC, a turning point in the history of the ancient world. The sun is setting over the limestone hills of Jerusalem, casting long, ominous shadows over the city of David. But the darkness that approaches is not merely the coming of night. It is the shadow of a rising empire that will swallow the known world. For centuries, the people of Judah had lived under the illusion of safety. They believed that because they possessed the Temple of Solomon, no enemy could ever breach their walls. They believed that God was bound by covenant to protect them, regardless of how they lived. But they had forgotten the conditions of that covenant. Prophets had risen, voices crying out in the wilderness, pleading with the nation to return to the God of their fathers. Men like Jeremiah stood in the streets, weeping, warning of judgment. They warned of fire. They warned of a kingdom rising from the east, a lion from the thicket that would sweep across the land like an unstoppable flood. They spoke of 70 years of desolation. But the warnings were ignored. The scrolls were burned. The prophets were mocked and thrown into cisterns. Comfort had replaced covenant. Idolatry had replaced identity. The people worshipped the idols of the surrounding nations on the high places, yet still came to the temple to offer empty sacrifices. And now, the time for words had passed. The time for judgment had arrived. Far to the north, on the banks of the Euphrates River, the balance of global power shifted violently. At the Battle of Carchemish, the rising Babylonian war machine, led by the brilliant and ruthless crown prince Nebuchadnezzar, crushed the armies of Egypt. The Assyrian Empire had fallen. Egypt was in retreat. There was now no superpower left to stand between Babylon and the tiny kingdom of Judah. Outside the walls of the holy city, the ground began to shake. It was not from an earthquake, but from the rhythmic, terrifying march of the most powerful army the world had ever seen. The Chaldeans. They were fierce, bitter, and hasty. Their horses were swifter than leopards and more fierce than the evening wolves. They flew like eagles hastening to eat. The siege was brief, but the message was devastatingly clear. The God of Israel had lifted his hand of protection. King Jehoiakim of Judah, trapped and powerless, surrendered to the inevitable. The scriptures record this moment with chilling simplicity in the opening verses of the book of Daniel. It says that the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar. Tut. Notice those words carefully. It was not Nebuchadnezzar's tactical genius that conquered the city. It was not the strength of his iron chariots or the vastness of his infantry. It was the sovereignty of God. The Creator was allowing the humiliation of his own city to discipline his own people. The Babylonian soldiers breached the sanctity of the temple, the house of God built by Solomon, the place where the glory of God had once descended like a cloud. They walked through the sacred courts with muddy boots and drawn swords. They did not just take the gold, they took the glory. They stripped the vessels of the house of God, the sacred cups, the golden basins, and the instruments used for worship, and they carried them away to the land of Shinar. They placed these holy objects in the treasure house of their own god, Marduk. It was a statement of spiritual dominance. In the ancient mind, wars were not just between armies, but between gods. When you captured a nation's sacred objects, you were declaring that your god had defeated theirs. Babylon was shouting to the world that Marduk was greater than Yahweh. But Nebuchadnezzar wanted more than just gold. He wanted the future. He understood that to truly conquer a nation, you do not just burn its buildings, you must capture its mind. He spoke to Ashpenaz, the master of his eunuchs, and gave an order that would change the course of history. He demanded a tribute of flesh and blood. He wanted the very best of Judah. He did not ask for the old men, set in their ways and hardened by tradition. He did not ask for the weak or the sick. He demanded the seed of the kingdom, the royalty, the nobility. The criteria for this selection were strict and uncompromising. He asked for children in whom was no blemish, but well-favored and skillful in all wisdom, and cunning in knowledge, and understanding science, and such as had ability in them to stand in the king's palace. He wanted the intellectual elite. He wanted the young men who were handsome, charismatic, and brilliant. He wanted to drain Judah of its future leadership and graft them into the glory of Babylon. Imagine the scene in Jerusalem as this selection took place. The weeping of mothers as their sons were torn from their arms. The despair of fathers watching their lineage marched away in chains. These were teenagers, likely between the ages of 14 and 17. They were the brightest minds of their generation. They were the future priests, the future judges, the future fathers of Israel. And now, they were prisoners of war. Among them were 4 young men whose names we still remember today, thousands of years later: Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. They were chained together and forced to march. The journey from Jerusalem to Babylon is roughly 900 miles. It was a brutal trek across the burning sands of the Syrian desert, a trade route known as the Fertile Crescent. For weeks, perhaps months, they walked. With every step, the limestone hills of Judea faded further behind them. With every step, the familiar sight of the Temple Mount was replaced by the flat, endless horizon of foreign lands. They were leaving behind everything they knew: their families, their culture, their heritage, and the land where God dwelt. They were walking into the belly of the beast. They faced heat, exhaustion, thirst, and the constant humiliation of being captives displayed before the conquering army. Nothing could have prepared these young Judean boys for the sight of the great city of Babylon. In the ancient world, Babylon was not just a city, it was an architectural miracle. It was the jewel of the earth, the center of commerce, science, and military might. As they approached, they would have seen the massive double walls, so thick that chariots could race atop them 4 abreast. They would have seen the Euphrates River flowing directly through the center of the city, feeding a lush network of canals and gardens that seemed to defy the desert environment. They would have walked down the famous processional way, a road paved with limestone and red breccia. Looming before them was the Ishtar Gate, towering 50 feet high, covered in blue glazed bricks that shimmered in the desert sun like lapis lazuli. The gate was decorated with reliefs of dragons and bulls, symbols of the gods Marduk and Adad. They walked through the gate, surrounded by temples to gods they did not know. The Tower of Babel had once stood in this region, a testament to human pride. Now, Nebuchadnezzar was building a new empire of pride, a golden city that claimed to be the axis of the universe. For Daniel and his friends, this was meant to be intimidating. It was designed to make them feel small, to make their God seem insignificant and defeated. How could the God of a small, conquered hill in Judah compare to the gods who built this magnificence? Every brick in Babylon screamed power. Every statue screamed dominance. They were brought into the king's palace, but they were not thrown into a dungeon or forced into manual labor in the fields. No, Nebuchadnezzar had a more sinister and sophisticated plan. He did not want to destroy their bodies. He wanted to assimilate their minds. He wanted to reprogram them. The plan was a 3-year intensive University of Babylon. They were to be taught the learning and the tongue of the Chaldeans. This was the Ivy League of the ancient world. They would learn Akkadian, a difficult and complex diplomatic language. They would study astronomy, mathematics, architecture, and the occult magic of the Babylonian wise men. They would be taught to read the omens in sheep livers and the movement of the stars. The goal was simple: take these Jewish princes and turn them into Babylonian sorcerers. Erase their past to secure the king's future. The king wanted to use their brilliance to serve his empire. And the first step in this reprogramming was to strip them of their identity. The master of the eunuchs gave them new names. This was not a random act of administration. In Hebrew culture, a name was not just a label. It was a character description, a prophetic destiny. It often contained the name of God, El or Yah. Daniel's name meant God is my judge. It was a constant reminder that no matter what men said, no matter what the king decreed, he answered to a higher court. But the Babylonians changed his name to Belteshazzar. This meant lady, protect the king, or Bel protects his life, referring to a Babylonian deity. They tried to change him from a servant of the judge to a servant of a pagan idol. Hananiah's name meant the Lord is gracious, a beautiful reminder of God's mercy, even in the midst of judgment. They changed his name to Shadrach, which implies the command of Aku, the moon god. They tried to eclipse the grace of God with the darkness of their moon deity. Mishael's name was a question. Who's like God? It was a challenge to all idols. There's no one like Yahweh. He is unique, holy, and separate. They changed his name to Meshach, which asks who is like Aku, a direct mockery of his original name, twisting his identity to praise a false god. And Azariah, whose name meant the Lord has helped. They renamed him Abednego, meaning servant of Nego, the god of wisdom and vegetation. Do you see the strategy? Every time someone called their names, they were forced to speak the names of foreign gods. It was a psychological war. The empire was saying, "You are not Jews anymore. You belong to Babylon now. Your God is gone. Your past is erased." But while they could change their names, they could not change their hearts. And this is where the conflict begins. The king appointed them a daily provision of the king's meat and of the wine which he drank. This was considered a great honor. To eat from the king's table was to be treated like royalty. It was the best food in the world. Rich meats, roasted pork, exotic delicacies, the finest wines from the royal vineyards. For any other teenager, this would have been paradise. They were slaves, yet they were eating like princes. It was seductive. It was comfortable. It was meant to make them love their captors. But for Daniel, this was a trap. The scripture contains one of the most powerful sentences in the entire Bible. But Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's meat, nor with the wine which he drank. Why was the food such a big deal? Was Daniel just being a picky eater? Was he just trying to be difficult? No, Dottie. This was about covenant. This was about loyalty. First, the meat likely included pork or horse, animals forbidden by the law of Moses in Leviticus. To eat them would be to break the commandment of God. Second, and perhaps more importantly, the animals at the king's table were first sacrificed to the idols of Babylon. The wine was poured out as a libation to Marduk. To partake of that meal was to participate in the worship of demons. It was to sit at the table of a false god and say, "I am one of you." It was a chaotic mixture of idolatry and compromise. Daniel drew a line in the sand. He was hundreds of miles from home. His parents were gone. The temple was destroyed. The priests were dead. No one was watching. He could have easily said, "Well, I have to survive. God will understand. I am in a foreign land. I have to adapt. I don't want to offend the king." But Daniel realized something that we often forget. You can change my location. You can change my name. You can change my education. But you cannot have my soul. He understood that small compromises lead to total corruption. Daniel approached the prince of the eunuchs. He requested that he might not defile himself. Notice his approach. He was not rebellious. He was not arrogant. He did not start a riot or scream at his captors. He showed wisdom and respect. God had brought Daniel into favor and tender love with the prince of the eunuchs. This was the first miracle, that a Babylonian official would even listen to a Jewish captive. But the official was afraid. He said to Daniel, "I fear my lord the king, who hath appointed your meat and your drink. For why should he see your faces worse liking than the children which are of your sort? Then shall ye make me endanger my head to the king." This was a valid fear. Nebuchadnezzar was not a man of mercy. He was a tyrant who roasted his enemies in fire. If these boys looked weak, pale, or sickly, the official would be executed for incompetence. So Daniel proposed a test, a scientific challenge of faith. He spoke to Melzar, the steward appointed over them. "Prove thy servants, I beseech thee, 10 days, and let them give us pulse to eat and water to drink." Pulse refers to vegetables, legumes, grains, and seeds. A simple vegan diet. And water. No wine to dull the senses. Then let our countenances be looked upon before thee, and the countenance of the children that eat of the portion of the king's meat, and as thou seest, deal with thy servants. It was a gamble. 10 days is not a long time to see a drastic physical change. Usually, malnutrition takes weeks to show. But Daniel was not banking on biology. He was banking on theology. He knew that obedience to God brings a strength that the world cannot understand. He knew that man does not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. He was trusting that God would sustain them supernaturally because they were honoring his law. For 10 days, the test ran its course. Imagine the dining hall. The other captives feasted on the king's rich pork, drank the heavy wine, and laughed and partied in the palace. They indulged in the luxury of the empire. Meanwhile, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah sat in their quarters. They ate their vegetables. They drank their water. And they likely prayed. They fasted from the world's luxury to feast on God's faithfulness. I imagine the other captives mocked them. Look at those fanatics. They are throwing away their chance. They are going to be weak. They are going to be killed. It is never popular to be holy. It is never easy to be different. But they held their ground. Then came the morning of the 11th day. The steward, Melzar, lined them up for inspection. He inspected the other young men who had eaten the king's portion. They looked fine, perhaps a bit sluggish from the heavy food and wine, weighed down by the excess of the palace. Then he looked at Daniel and his friends. The Bible says that at the end of 10 days their countenances appeared fairer and fatter in flesh than all the children which did eat the portion of the king's meat. They did not just look okay. They looked better. They were glowing with health. Their eyes were clear and bright. Their skin was vibrant. There was a vitality and an energy in them that the king's diet could not produce. It was the supernatural sustainment of God. Because of this victory, the steward took away the meat and wine from the others, or at least allowed Daniel to continue his diet. They had passed the first test. They had conquered the lust of the flesh. They proved that you do not need the world's luxuries to thrive. You only need God's blessing. But the story does not end with a diet plan. This was not about health. It was about wisdom. The scripture tells us that as for these 4 children, God gave them knowledge and skill in all learning and wisdom, and Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. Notice the source. God gave them knowledge. The source of their intelligence was not the Babylonian University. It was not the library of Ashurbanipal. It was Yahweh. While they studied the Babylonian books, they filtered everything through the truth of God's law. They learned the science of the Chaldeans, but they rejected the superstition. They excelled in their studies, not because they believed the Babylonian lies, but because they had the spirit of excellence. 3 years passed. The time of training was over. The time of graduation arrived. Now came the final exam. But this was not a written test. This was an oral interview with the most terrifying man on earth, King Nebuchadnezzar himself. Imagine the atmosphere in the throne room. The high ceilings, the hanging gardens, visible through the arches, the guards with spears, the scribes with clay tablets, ready to record the results. And there, on the throne sat the man who had burned their city and enslaved their people. He held the power of life and death in a snap of his fingers. The king communed with them. He engaged them in deep conversation. He asked them hard questions. He posed riddles. He tested their understanding of politics, astronomy, history, logic, and magic. He pushed their minds to the limit. And among all the captives from all the nations, not just Judah, but all the lands Babylon had conquered, none were found like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. They stood out. They shone like stars in the night sky. The verdict is recorded clearly in the text, and in all matters of wisdom and understanding, that the king inquired of them. He found them 10 times better than all the magicians and astrologers that were in all his realm. 10 times better. Not twice as good, not slightly superior. 10 times. This is the exponential factor of God's favor. When you honor God in the secret place, when you refuse the king's meat, when you keep your conscience clean in the dark, God honors you in the public place. He gave them a wisdom that the world could not replicate. The magicians of Babylon relied on demons and trickery. Daniel relied on the creator of the universe. These 4 young men, slaves in a foreign land, with no army, no weapons, and no political rights, had just conquered the court of Babylon. They had risen to the top of the empire, not by compromising, but by standing firm. They were now positioned in the king's court, ready to influence the greatest superpower on earth. This chapter sets the stage for everything that is to follow. Daniel is now positioned close to power. He is respected. But the challenges are just beginning. The peace will not last long. Soon, the king will have a dream that no magician can interpret. A nightmare that will threaten the lives of every wise man in the city. Soon a golden statue will be erected on the plain of Dura, demanding total submission or death by fire. Soon, a conspiracy will open a den of hungry lions. But chapter 1 teaches us the fundamental lesson of the book, the foundation upon which every prophecy rests. God is in control. He was in control when Jerusalem fell. He was in control on the long, dusty march to Babylon. He was in control of the diet test. And he is in control of the minds of kings. Daniel's name means God is my judge. And as we will see in the coming chapters, the judgments of God are about to shake the foundations of the greatest empire on earth. From the prisoner's chains to the palace courts, this is the story of the man who saw the end of the world. Join us next time for chapter 2, where a nightmare terrifies the king, and the entire timeline of human history is revealed in a single colossal statue. This is the book of Daniel. Chapter 2, The Dream That Scared a King. The 2nd year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar. The year is approximately 603 BC. The empire of Babylon is at the height of its power. It stretches from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean Sea. Its armies are undefeated. Its walls are impenetrable. Its treasury is overflowing with the gold of conquered nations. King Nebuchadnezzar sits on the most powerful throne in human history. He is a man who has everything. He has absolute power, absolute wealth, and absolute control. By all human standards, he should be sleeping soundly, secure in his greatness. But one night, the king cannot sleep. The Bible tells us that his sleep broke from him. It was not just insomnia, it was a spiritual disturbance. In the silence of the royal chamber, surrounded by guards and luxury, the most powerful man on earth was terrified. God breached the walls of the palace, not with an army, but with a dream. A nightmare so vivid, so overwhelming, and so terrifying that the king woke up shaking, his spirit troubled. But here is the twist that makes this narrative so tense. When he awoke, the details of the dream vanished. The horror remained. The heavy sense of doom remained, but the image itself was locked behind a mental fog. He knew he had seen something of vital importance, a message from the divine, but he could not grasp it. Panic turned into paranoia. In the ancient world, dreams were considered messages from the gods. To forget a dream from the gods was a bad omen. It meant the gods were angry, or that a calamity was approaching that could not be stopped. Nebuchadnezzar, a man used to controlling everything, suddenly realized he could not control his own mind. In a fit of desperation and rage, the king commanded to call the magicians, and the astrologers, and the sorcerers, and the Chaldeans. This was the king's brain trust. These were the PhD holders of Babylon, the occult experts, the men who claimed to have a direct line to the spirit world. They claimed they could read the future in the stars, in the livers of sheep, and in the patterns of oil on water. They were the most respected and highly paid men in the empire. They hurried into the throne room, perhaps still adjusting their robes, sleep in their eyes, wondering why the king had summoned them in the middle of the night. They stood before the king, expecting a routine request. Usually the king would say, I had a dream about a snake eating an eagle, and they would pull out their dream books and say, 'O king, the snake is your enemy and the eagle is your victory. Live forever.' They were masters of vague flattery. They knew how to tell the king what he wanted to hear. But tonight, the script changed. Nebuchadnezzar looked at them with wild eyes and said, 'I have dreamed a dream, and my spirit was troubled to know the dream.' The Chaldeans, confident in their routine, answered in Aramaic, 'O king, live forever. Tell thy servants the dream, and we will show the interpretation.' This was the trap. If the king told them the dream, they could invent any meaning they wanted. They could spin a lie. And Nebuchadnezzar, in his paranoia, suddenly saw through them. He realized that for years he might have been surrounded by sycophants and liars. He decided to test them. He decided to put their supernatural powers to the ultimate proof. The king answered and said to the Chaldeans, 'The thing is gone from me.' Or, in other translations, 'The decree is firm.' He said, 'If you will not make known unto me the dream, with the interpretation thereof, ye shall be cut in pieces, and your houses shall be made a dunghill.' The room must have gone deathly silent. The demand was impossible. No king had ever asked such a thing. He was saying, 'If you are truly psychic, if you truly talk to the gods, then you should know what I dreamed without me telling you. Tell me the dream first, to prove you have the power, and then I will believe of your interpretation.' The magicians were terrified. They tried to reason with him. They pleaded, 'There is not a man upon the earth that can show the king's matter. Therefore, there is no king, Lord, nor ruler, that asked such things at any magician, or astrologer, or Chaldean.' They admitted their own fraud. They admitted that unless a god came down and whispered it in their ear, they were helpless. They were exposing the emptiness of the Babylonian religion. Their gods were silent. Their magic was useless against the truth. Nebuchadnezzar snapped. His paranoia turned into bloodlust. If his wise men were frauds, they were useless to him. Why pay them? Why feed them? For this cause the king was angry, and very furious, and commanded to destroy all the wise men of Babylon. The decree went out immediately. The king's guard, the executioners, drew their swords. The slaughter was about to begin. And this decree included everyone in the guild of wise men, including the 4 young Hebrew interns who had just graduated: Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Arioch, the captain of the king's guard, a man whose job was to kill, marched to Daniel's quarters. Imagine the scene. A knock on the door in the middle of the night, or perhaps the door being kicked in. Arioch standing there with soldiers, grim-faced. "Daniel, come with us. It's time to die. The king has ordered the execution of all wise men." Most men would have panicked. Most would have screamed, begged, or tried to run. But Daniel reacted with a supernatural calmness. The Bible says Daniel answered with counsel and wisdom. He didn't ask, "Why me?" He asked, "Why is the decree so hasty from the king?" Daniel went in and desired of the king that he would give him time, and that he would show the king the interpretation. This was a bold move. Daniel walked into the lion's den before he was ever thrown into the literal one. He asked for time. Not time to run away, but time to pray. Daniel went to his house and made the thing known to his companions. He didn't try to solve this alone. He didn't try to use his own intellect. He called a prayer meeting. He told Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah to desire mercies of the God of heaven concerning this secret. This is the turning point of the chapter. On one side, you have the hysteria of the pagan magicians. On the other side, you have the quiet confidence of 4 believers. They got on their knees. They knew that the God of Israel was the revealer of secrets. They knew that unlike the gods of Babylon, their God was not silent. They prayed for their lives. They prayed for the future of their nation. Then, in the deep silence of the night, the answer came. Then was the secret revealed unto Daniel in a night vision. God opened a curtain of time. He allowed Daniel to step into the mind of the king and see the dream. But more than that, God showed Daniel the interpretation. The relief must have been overwhelming. Daniel didn't rush to the palace immediately. The first thing he did was worship. He broke into a hymn of praise. Blessed be the name of God forever and ever, for wisdom and might are his, and he changeth the times and the seasons. He removeth kings, and setteth up kings. Daniel understood the main point before he even spoke to the king. History is not driven by politics. It is driven by God. Kings rise and fall not because of their armies, but because God moves them like pieces on a chessboard. Daniel went to Arioch and said, "Destroy not the wise men of Babylon." He even saved the lives of the men who couldn't save themselves. "Bring me in before the king." Daniel stood before Nebuchadnezzar. The king, desperate and skeptical, asked, "Art thou able to make known unto me the dream which I have seen, and the interpretation thereof?" Daniel's answer is a masterclass in humility and witness. He does not take the credit. He says, "The secret which the king hath demanded cannot the wise men, the astrologers, the magicians, the soothsayers, shew unto the king. But there is a God in heaven that revealeth secrets, and maketh known to the king Nebuchadnezzar what shall be in the latter days." He points the finger upward. "I am not smarter than your magicians, O king, but my God is real." And then Daniel begins to describe the nightmare. "Thou, O king, sawest, and behold, a great image. This great image, whose brightness was excellent, stood before thee, and the form thereof was terrible." Nebuchadnezzar must have grabbed the arms of his throne. This was it. The young Hebrew was describing the terror he had felt. A colossus. A massive, shining, terrifying statue of a man. Daniel continues to describe the anatomy of this metal monster. This image's head was of fine gold, his breast and his arms of silver, his belly and his thighs of brass, his legs of iron and part of clay. The king listens, mesmerized. Every detail is correct. The shining gold head, the blinding silver chest, the glowing bronze belly, the cold, hard iron legs. It was a timeline of human history, frozen in metal. But the dream didn't end with the statue. There was a climax. "Thou sawest till that a stone was cut out without hands, which smote the image upon his feet, that were of iron and clay, and brake them to pieces. Then was the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, and the gold, broken to pieces together, and became like the chaff of the summer threshing floors." Silence filled the throne room. Nebuchadnezzar knew. That was exactly what he had seen. The destruction. The dust. The mysterious stone. "This is the dream," Daniel said confidently, "and we will tell the interpretation thereof before the king." Now Daniel becomes the prophet of history. He explains that the statue represents the succession of world empires from that day until the end of time. "Thou, O king, art a king of kings. Thou art this head of gold." Babylon was the head. Gold represented its splendor, its wealth, and its absolute autocracy. Nebuchadnezzar was the supreme ruler given power by God. He was the peak of glory. "And after thee shall arise another kingdom inferior to thee, the chest and arms of silver." Silver is valuable, but less valuable than gold. However, it is harder. This represented the Medo-Persian Empire that would conquer Babylon in 539 BC. Just as statue had two arms, this empire was a dual alliance of the Medes and the Persians. They were inferior in splendor. They lacked the architectural glory of Babylon, but they were stronger in law and organization. "And another third kingdom of brass, which shall bear rule over all the earth. The belly and thighs of bronze." Bronze is harder than silver. This predicted the rise of Alexander the Great and the Greek Empire. Alexander's soldiers wore bronze armor, carried bronze shields, and conquered the known world with lightning speed. The belly suggests a massive appetite for conquest. They extended their rule further than Persia, all the way to India. "And the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron." The legs of iron. Iron is the strongest of all these metals. It crushes and breaks in pieces. This is the Roman Empire. Rome arose with brutal efficiency. It didn't have the glamour of Babylon or the intellect of Greece. It had the military machine of the Iron Legions. Rome crushed the nations, built roads, and ruled with an iron fist for centuries. The two legs represent the eventual division of the empire into the Western and Eastern, Byzantine. But then, the prophecy gets strange. It moves to the feet and toes, and whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, part of potter's clay, and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided. They shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. This represents the final phase of human government. The Roman Empire technically never fell in the sense of being conquered by a fifth empire. It dissolved into the nations of Europe and the modern world. We are living in the time of the feet. A mixture of strength, iron, and fragility, clay. Dictatorships mixed with democracies. Strong alliances mixed with weak fractures. It is a world that tries to unite, through treaties, through the United Nations, through globalism, but cannot hold together, just as iron does not mix with clay. Clay. But the most important part of the dream is not the statue. It is the stone. And in the days of these kings, shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom, which shall never be destroyed, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. Daniel describes a stone cut out without hands. In Scripture, without hands means supernatural, not of human origin. This stone is Jesus Christ. The dream predicts that the kingdom of God will not come from a political election. It will not come from a human revolution. It will come violently from above, striking the image at its feet. This prophecy tells us that all human governments, Babylonian gold, Persian silver, Greek bronze, Roman iron, and modern clay, will eventually be crushed. They will become like dust in the wind. They are temporary. They are flawed. But the stone grows into a mountain that fills the whole earth. This is the millennial kingdom of Christ and the eternal state, a kingdom of righteousness that will have no end. Daniel looked the most powerful man in the world in the eye and told him, "Your kingdom is going to end. All kingdoms are going to end. Only God's kingdom is eternal. The dream is certain, and the interpretation thereof sure." The reaction of Nebuchadnezzar is shocking. This proud, arrogant, murderous tyrant stands up from his throne, walks down the steps, and falls on his face before the young Hebrew captive. The king worshipped Daniel, and commanded that they should offer an oblation and sweet odors unto him. But listen to what the king admits. "Of a truth it is, that your God is a God of gods, and a Lord of kings, and a revealer of secrets, seeing thou couldst reveal this secret." For a moment, the pagan king was forced to bow his knee to the reality of Yahweh. The head of gold bowed to the God of heaven. Daniel was promoted. He was made ruler over the whole province of Babylon and chief of the governors over all the wise men. He brought his friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, up with him. They were set over the affairs of the province. God had taken 4 prisoners of war and placed them in the highest seats of government in the greatest empire on earth. Why? Because they stayed faithful, because they prayed, and because God wanted a witness in the heart of Babylon. But the heart of a king is fickle. Nebuchadnezzar acknowledged God today, but pride is a weed that grows back quickly. The mention of the head of gold planted a seed of vanity in Nebuchadnezzar's mind. He heard you are the head of gold, but he forgot the part about after thee shall arise another. In the next chapter, we will see that Nebuchadnezzar decides he doesn't want to be just the head. He wants to be the whole statue. He wants to be gold from head to toe. And this rebellion will lead to a fiery furnace that is heated 7 times hotter than normal. Join us next time for Chapter 3, where faith meets fire, and we discover that when you walk through the flames with God, you never walk alone. This is the book of Daniel. Chapter 3, the fiery furnace. The timeline moves forward. We are no longer in the quiet of the royal bedchamber grappling with a dream. We are now standing under the scorching sun on the vast plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. Years may have passed since Daniel interpreted the king's dream of the great statue. In that dream, King Nebuchadnezzar was told he was the head of gold. It was a compliment, but it was also a limitation. The dream said that after him would come another kingdom, one of silver. It said his kingdom would end. But pride is a relentless enemy. Nebuchadnezzar, the ruler of the known world, could not accept the idea that his glory was temporary. He could not accept being just the head. He wanted to be the whole body. He wanted to be the gold, the silver, the bronze, the iron, and the clay. He wanted an eternal empire. So, in an act of supreme defiance against the prophecy of God, the king commanded a new construction. On the flat plains outside the city, where the horizon stretches endlessly, a monstrosity began to rise. It was an image of gold. The Bible tells us the dimensions, 60 cubits high and 6 cubits wide. In modern terms, that is 90 feet tall, roughly the height of a 9-story building, but only 9 feet wide. It was a bizarre, towering obelisk of pure, blinding gold. It did not have a chest of silver or legs of bronze. It was gold from top to bottom. Nebuchadnezzar was making a theological statement in metal. There will be no other kingdom. Babylon is eternal. I am eternal. This was not just a statue. It was a test of loyalty. It was the ancient world's version of a totalitarian flag. The king sent out a decree to gather the princes, the governors, the captains, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and all of the rulers of the provinces. Every politician, every bureaucrat, every person of influence in the entire empire was summoned to the dedication of the image. Imagine the scene. Thousands of dignitaries, dressed in their finest robes, sweating in the desert heat, standing in precise formation before this towering idol. The sun would have reflected off the gold with blinding intensity. It was designed to overwhelm the senses. It was designed to make the individual feel small, and the state feel like God. Then came the herald, crying aloud with a commanding voice, "To you it is commanded, O people, nations and languages, that at what time ye hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, dulcimer, and all kinds of music, ye fall." The threat was immediate and brutal, and whoso falleth not down and worshippeth shall the same hour be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. This was not a suggestion. It was a mandate. Conform or die. Bow or burn. The king knew that visual dominance wasn't enough. He needed psychological manipulation. That is why he used music. Music bypasses the intellect and speaks directly to the emotions. When the orchestra played, a chaotic, hypnotic blend of wind and string instruments, it created a communal pressure. Everyone else is doing it. The music swells. The dread rises. The knee bends instinctively. And so the moment came. The band struck up. The sound echoed across the plain. And like a wave of wheat bending in the wind, thousands of men, Persians, Egyptians, Syrians, Babylonians, dropped to their faces in the dust. A sea of submission. Except for 3. Standing upright in a field of bowed bodies were Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Where was Daniel? The Bible does not say. Perhaps he was away on state business in another province. Perhaps he was too high-ranking to be part of this specific ceremony. Or perhaps he was there, standing elsewhere, also refusing to bow. But the camera of Scripture zooms in on these 3 friends. They were the ones we met in chapter 1. They were the ones who refused the king's meat. They had been promoted to high positions in the province of Babylon. They were recognizable figures. Their refusal to bow was not an act of political rebellion. It was an act of spiritual fidelity. The first commandment of their God was clear: "Thou shalt have no other gods before me." The second commandment was equally clear: "Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them." For Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, the choice was binary. They could please the king and offend God, or they could offend the king and please God. They chose the latter. But in every organization, there are eyes watching. There were certain Chaldeans, native Babylonian wise men, who likely resented these young Jewish upstarts who had been promoted over them, who saw an opportunity. Jealousy is a powerful motivator. They rushed to the king, not out of piety for the idol, but out of hatred for the Hebrews. They approached Nebuchadnezzar with manipulative flattery. "O king, live forever." They reminded him of the decree, and then they dropped the accusation. "There are certain Jews whom thou hast set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, have not regarded thee. They serve not thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up." Notice the phrasing, "whom thou hast set over the affairs." They were attacking the king's judgment. You promoted these men, and this is how they repay you. They made it personal. They didn't say, "They don't worship the statue." They said, "They have not regarded thee." Nebuchadnezzar's reaction was volcanic. This was the man who conquered Jerusalem, Tyre. No one told him no. In his rage and fury, he commanded that the three men be brought before him. When they arrived, the king gave them one last chance. Perhaps he liked them. Perhaps he remembered their wisdom from years ago. He asked, "Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, do not ye serve my gods, nor worship the golden image which I have set up?" He offers them a way out. "I will play the music again. If you bow now, all is forgiven. But if not..." And then Nebuchadnezzar issues the ultimate challenge, a challenge that echoes through the corridors of time. He asks a question that God himself would answer. "And who is that God that shall deliver you out of my hands?" It was the ultimate boast of a humanist tyrant. He believed the state was supreme. He believed no power in heaven or earth could snatch a victim from his grip. The response of the three Hebrew young men is one of the most courageous statements in the entire Bible. They did not tremble. They did not ask for a lawyer. They did not try to negotiate. They answered and said to the king, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter." In the King James English, careful means full of care or anxious. They were saying, "We don't need time to think about this. We don't need to craft a clever defense." Then they delivered their declaration of faith. "If it be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of thine hand, O king." That is faith. God is able. They knew his power. They knew he parted the Red Sea. They knew he brought down the walls of Jericho. But then they added three words that define true courage. "But if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up." This is crucial. They were saying, "Our God is able to save us, but even if he chooses not to save us, even if he allows us to burn, he is still God, and you are still an idol." Their obedience was not conditional on their survival. They were willing to die for the truth. They loved God more than they loved their own lives. This shattered the king's ego. The Bible says the form of his visage was changed. His face twisted into a demonic mask of pure hatred. He had been defied publicly. He commanded that they should heat the furnace 7 times more than it was wont to be heated. This was irrational rage. A furnace heated normally kills you instantly. Heating it 7 times hotter simply wastes fuel. But Nebuchadnezzar wanted them to suffer. He wanted them obliterated. He commanded the most mighty men in his army to bind them and cast them in. The 3 men were bound in their coats, their hosen, and their hats. They were fully dressed in their flammable official garments. The furnace was likely a massive kiln used for firing bricks or smelting the gold for the statue, with an opening at the top and a door at the side. The fire was so intense, so ragingly hot, that as the mighty soldiers approached the opening to throw the prisoners in, the radiant heat killed the executioners. The flames leaped out and consumed the king's best men. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego fell down bound into the midst of the burning, fiery furnace. Nebuchadnezzar sat down to watch the execution. He expected to see 3 bodies curl up and turn to ash in seconds. He watched the flames roar. But then he saw movement. The king rose up in haste. He was trembling. He turned to his counselors and asked a question that revealed his confusion. "Did not we cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire?" They answered, "True, O king." Nebuchadnezzar stared into the blinding white heart of the fire. His eyes widened in disbelief. "Lo, I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt, and the form of the 4th is like the Son of God." The miracle was not just that they survived. It was how they survived. First, they were loose. The fire had burned the ropes that bound them, but it had not touched their bodies. The only thing the fire destroyed was their bondage. Second, they were walking. They were not huddled in a corner screaming. They were walking peacefully amidst the flames, as if they were strolling in a garden. Third, they were not alone. There was a 4th man. Who was this 4th man? Nebuchadnezzar, a pagan, called him a son of the gods, or son of God. Christian theology identifies this as a Christophany, a pre-incarnate appearance of Jesus Christ. The angel of the Lord. The shepherd had stepped into the valley of the shadow of death to be with his sheep. God did not put out the fire. He stepped into the fire with them. He changed the nature of the fire so that it became a sanctuary rather than a tomb. Nebuchadnezzar, the man who asked, "Who is that God that shall deliver you?" now had his answer. He approached the mouth of the furnace. He couldn't go too close, but he shouted over the roar of the flames, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, ye servants of the Most High God, come forth and come hither." He recognized their identity. They were no longer rebels. They were servants of the Most High. The 3 men walked out of the fire. The princes, governors, and captains, the same men who had bowed to the idol, crowded around them to inspect the miracle. The evidence was undeniable. Upon whose bodies the fire had no power, nor was an hair of their head singed. Neither were their coats changed, nor the smell of fire had passed on them. This is scientifically impossible. Smoke permeates everything. If you stand near a campfire for 5 minutes, your clothes smell like smoke for days. These men had been inside a furnace heated 7 times hotter than normal, yet they didn't even smell like they had been near heat. It was a complete, total, perfect deliverance. Nebuchadnezzar broke down. For the 2nd time in his life, he was forced to praise the God of the Hebrews. "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who hath sent his angel, and delivered his servants that trusted in him, and have changed the king's word, and yielded their bodies, that they might not serve nor worship any god, except their own God." The king realized that these men had changed the king's word. Their faith was stronger than his law. He issued a new decree. He commanded that any people, nation, or language that spoke anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego would be cut in pieces. For there is no other God that can deliver after this sort. The chapter ends with a promotion. The king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. They went from the furnace to the palace. This story echoes through the centuries as the ultimate testament to faith under pressure. It teaches us that the state is not God. It teaches us that conscience is sacred. But most importantly, it teaches us about the nature of God's deliverance. Often, we pray for God to deliver us from the fire. We want Him to put out the flames before they touch us. But sometimes, God chooses to deliver us through the fire. He allows us to be cast in, so that He can meet us there. He allows the heat to rise, so that the world can see that He is the God who cannot be burned. The plain of Dura is empty now. The golden statue is long gone, turned to dust and lost to history. Nebuchadnezzar is dead. The Babylonian Empire has fallen. But the testimony of 3 young men who stood when everyone else bowed remains standing. And the 4th man, the Son of God, is still walking with his people in the fires of life today. But for Nebuchadnezzar, The lessons were not yet fully learned. He had acknowledged God's wisdom in chapter 2. He had acknowledged God's power in chapter 3, but he had not yet acknowledged God's sovereignty over his own personal pride. The king was still the center of his own universe. And so, God prepared a lesson that would strike not at the king's empire, but at his very mind. A lesson that would drive him from the throne to the animal kingdom. Join us next time for chapter 4, the tragedy of the tree and the madness of the king. This is the book of Daniel. Chapter 4, the madness of the king. We have now reached a pivotal moment in the ancient world. The narrative shifts dramatically in tone and perspective. We are no longer looking at the events through the eyes of the young Hebrew captive, Daniel. Instead, we are reading a personal testimony, a royal proclamation written by the most powerful man on earth. Chapter 4 of the book of Daniel is unique in the entire Bible. It is the only chapter written by a pagan king. It is a state document, a decree sent to all people, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth. It is the confession of King Nebuchadnezzar. Decades have passed since the fiery furnace. The king is now an older man. He has conquered every enemy. He has built the most magnificent city the world has ever seen. He has seen the power of God in the interpretation of the metallic statue, and he has seen the power of God in the deliverance from the fire. But seeing miracles does not always change the heart. Nebuchadnezzar had acknowledged God's power, but he had not submitted to God's sovereignty. He treated Yahweh as just another high-level deity in his collection, perhaps the strongest one, but still a god that could be managed. The king was still the center of his own universe. He was still the head of gold. But God, in his mercy, was about to break the king to save the man. The story begins with a dream. Unlike the first dream in chapter 2, which the king forgot, this dream remained vivid in his mind. It was a nightmare that haunted him. He was at rest in his house and flourishing in his palace. He was comfortable. He was secure. And then, the images came. Once again, the wise men of Babylon, the magicians, the astrologers, the Chaldeans were summoned. And once again they failed. It is a recurring theme in this book. The wisdom of this world is foolishness with God. They could look at the stars, but they could not see the truth. Finally, Daniel was brought in. The king calls him Belteshazzar, acknowledging the name of his own God, yet he admits that the spirit of the holy gods is in him. Even after all these years, Nebuchadnezzar recognizes that Daniel is different. He is not just smart, he is spiritual. The king recounts the vision. He saw a tree in the midst of the earth. This was not an ordinary tree. Its height was great. It grew and was strong, and the height thereof reached unto heaven, and the sight thereof to the end of all the earth. Its leaves were fair, its fruit much, and in it was meat for all. The beasts of the field had shadow under it, and the fowls of the heaven dwelt in the boughs thereof, and all flesh was fed of it. This tree represented the Neo-Babylonian Empire at its zenith. It was a superpower that provided economic stability, protection, and sustenance to the known world. It was magnificent. It was sheltering. It seemed eternal. But then the dream turned dark. The king saw a watcher and a holy one coming down from heaven. This term watcher is fascinating. It appears only here in the Old Testament. It refers to a specific class of angelic being, a sentinel who patrols the earth on behalf of the Most High, observing the deeds of men. This angel cried aloud with a terrifying command. Hew down the tree and cut off his branches, shake off his leaves and scatter his fruit. Let the beasts get away from under it, and the fowls from his branches. The command was total destruction. The great structure was to be dismantled. But there was a caveat. Nevertheless, leave the stump of his roots in the earth, even with a band of iron and brass in the tender grass of the field, and let it be wet with the dew of heaven, and let his portion be with the beasts in the grass of the earth. Then the angel shifted his language. He stopped talking about a tree and started talking about a man. He said, Let his heart be changed from man's, and let a beast's heart be given unto him, and let 7 times pass over him. The verdict was sealed with a chilling theological statement. This matter is by the decree of the watchers, and the demand by the word of the holy ones, to the intent that the living may know that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and giveth it to whomsoever he will, and setteth up over it the basest of men. When Daniel heard this, the Bible says he was astonished for 1 hour, and his thoughts troubled him. This reveals the heart of Daniel. He did not hate the king. He did not rejoice that his captor was about to be judged. He had served Nebuchadnezzar for decades. He had likely developed a relationship of respect, perhaps even affection, for this flawed tyrant. Daniel stood in silence, terrified by the severity of the judgment he had to deliver. The king, seeing his hesitation, gently encouraged him. Belteshazzar, let not the dream, or the interpretation thereof, trouble thee. Daniel broke the silence with a statement of profound loyalty. My lord, the dream be to them that hate thee, and the interpretation thereof to thine enemies. He wished this judgment was for anyone else but the king. Then Daniel dropped the hammer. The tree that thou sawest, it is thou, O king, that art grown and become strong. You are the tree. You are the one who has reached the heavens. You are the one who shelters the nations. But because you are the tree, you are also the one who must be cut down. Daniel explained that the king would be driven from men. He would not die, but he would lose his mind. He would dwell with the beasts of the field. He would eat grass like an ox. He would be wet with the dew of heaven. And this insanity would last for 7 times, interpreted by most scholars as 7 literal years. Why? Until thou know that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men. The stump with the band of iron and bronze meant that the kingdom would be preserved for him. God was not removing the dynasty. He was putting it on pause. He was locking the stump so it wouldn't rot, waiting for the king to look up. Daniel ended with a plea. He preached the gospel to the pagan king. Wherefore, O king, let my counsel be acceptable unto thee, and break off thy sins by righteousness, and thine iniquities by shewing mercy to the poor. If it may be a lengthening of thy tranquility. Daniel gave him a way out. Repent. Humble yourself. Stop oppressing the poor. Use your power for good. If you do this, perhaps God will delay the judgment. For 12 months, it seemed to work. A whole year passed. The king likely felt an initial fear. Perhaps he performed some charitable acts. But as the months rolled by and no madness came, the fear faded. The warning was forgotten. The ego returned. 12 months later, the king was walking in the palace of the kingdom of Babylon. Historians tell us that the palace of Nebuchadnezzar was a wonder of the world. He had built the famous Hanging Gardens, a man-made mountain of lush vegetation, supposedly constructed to cheer up his wife who missed the green hills of her homeland. He had built the Ishtar Gate. He had fortified the walls. He looked out over the sprawling metropolis, the sun glinting off the gold temples, the Euphrates flowing through the canals, the bustling markets, the sheer architectural genius of it all. And the pride welled up in his heart like a poison. The king spake, and said, Is not this great Babylon, that I have built for the house of the kingdom by the might of my power, and for the honor of my majesty? Look at the pronouns. I have built, my power, my majesty. He stole the glory. He forgot that it was the God of heaven who gave him the kingdom. He forgot the head of gold dream. He forgot the fiery furnace. In that moment, he made himself God. The response from heaven was immediate. While the word was in the king's mouth, there fell a voice from heaven. It was the watcher returning. O King Nebuchadnezzar, to thee it is spoken, the kingdom is departed from thee. God did not wait. There was no more warning. The probation period was over. The same hour was the thing fulfilled upon Nebuchadnezzar. What followed is one of the most terrifying episodes in royal history. The mind of the brilliant strategist, the architect, the general, suddenly snapped. Modern psychology calls this boanthropy or lycanthropy, A rare delusion where a human being believes they are an animal. The king was driven from men. Imagine the chaos in the palace. The king starts screaming, tearing off his royal robes. He falls to all fours. He begins to grunt and roar. The guards are terrified. The counselors are horrified. They cannot have a mad animal sitting on the throne. They likely ushered him out, hiding him in the royal parks or the enclosed gardens, away from the public eye to protect the image of the empire. For 7 years, the greatest man on earth lived like a beast. The Bible gives us a graphic description. He did eat grass as oxen. His body was wet with the dew of heaven. He refused to bathe. He refused to cut his hair, till his hairs were grown like eagle's feathers, and his nails like bird's claws. Picture the scene. In the manicured gardens of Babylon, amidst the exotic flowers and fountains, there is a wild creature. His hair is matted and thick, covering his back like feathers. His fingernails and toenails are long, curled, and hardened like talons. His skin is baked by the sun and cracked by the wind. He grazes on the grass, chewing the cud. His eyes are wild and vacant. This is the head of gold. This is the man who defied God. He has been reduced to the lowest common denominator. He has become a part of the creation because he refused to honor the Creator. For 7 years, the throne sat empty. Daniel and the other counselors likely managed the affairs of state, keeping the secret, holding the stump of the kingdom together with bands of iron and bronze, waiting for the prophecy to be fulfilled. They watched the king in the garden, a living lesson of the sovereignty of God. But God's judgment is never without purpose. It is not just punitive, it is restorative. God didn't want to destroy Nebuchadnezzar, he wanted to save him. He had to strip him of his sanity to bring him to his senses. And at the end of the days I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted up mine eyes unto heaven. This is the turning point. For 7 years, the king had looked down at the earth, like an animal. Animals look down to graze. Humans look up to worship. The moment Nebuchadnezzar lifted his eyes, the moment he looked away from himself and toward the heavens, the curse was broken, and mine understanding returned unto me. The fog lifted. The delusion shattered. The king stood up. He looked at his matted hair, his claw-like nails, the dirt on his skin. He remembered who he was. But more importantly, he remembered who God was. His first act was not to run to the bathhouse. His first act was not to check on his treasury. His first act was worship. And I blessed the Most High, and I praised and honored him that liveth forever, whose dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom is from generation to generation. He finally got it. He finally understood the lesson of the statue, the lesson of the fire, and the lesson of the tree. And all the inhabitants of the earth are reputed as nothing, and he doeth according to his will in the army of heaven, and among the inhabitants of the earth. And none can stay his hand, or say unto him, What doest thou? This is the theology of a broken and healed man. He acknowledges that God is the only true sovereign. God does what he wants, when he wants, with whom he wants, and no one can audit him. No one can sue God. No one can vote him out. He is the Most High. Nebuchadnezzar's restoration was complete. At the same time my reason returned unto me, and for the glory of my kingdom, mine honor and brightness returned unto me. His counselors and lords sought him out. Imagine the reunion. They find the king washed, groomed, dressed in his robes, sitting in his right mind. The stump had sprouted again. The bands of iron were removed. He was established in his kingdom, and excellent majesty was added unto me. God did not just give him back what he had, he gave him more. Because now, the king was safe to lead. A leader who knows he is not God is a safe leader. A leader who has been humbled by heaven is a leader who can rule on earth. The chapter ends with the final words of King Nebuchadnezzar, daughter. It is his signature on the bottom of the decree. It is his final verdict on his life's journey with the God of Daniel. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and extol and honor the King of heaven, all whose works are truth, and his ways judgment, and those that walk in pride he is able to abase. Those that walk in pride he is able to abase. This is the epitaph of his ego. He learned it the hard way. This chapter serves as a warning to every ruler, every CEO, every celebrity, and every person who thinks they are self-made. The tree may be tall, but the axe is always at the root. We breathe God's air. We use God's energy. We live on God's earth. To claim glory for ourselves is not just arrogance, it is a form of madness. True sanity is recognizing our place before the Creator. Nebuchadnezzar disappears from the biblical narrative after this chapter. History tells us he died shortly after, in 562 BC. We can hope, based on this testimony, that we will see this Babylonian king in heaven. That the man who burned the temple of God on earth eventually became a temple of God himself. He was a beast who became a believer. But as one king exits the stage, another enters. The golden era of Babylon is fading. The silver empire is rising on the horizon. Nebuchadnezzar learned his lesson, but his grandson Belshazzar did not. Join us next time for Chapter 5, where the lights go out in Babylon. A party, a profanity, and a disembodied hand that writes the final sentence of an empire on the plaster of the wall. This is the book of Daniel. Chapter 5, The Writing on the Wall. The year is 539 BC. Nearly 70 years have passed since Daniel was dragged from Jerusalem in chains. The world has changed. The great king Nebuchadnezzar, the head of gold, has long since gone to his grave. The empire of Babylon, once the undisputed ruler of the earth, is now living in the twilight of its glory. We find ourselves in a city that is technically still powerful, but spiritually rotting from the inside out. The throne is now occupied by Belshazzar. He is the grandson of Nebuchadnezzar, a man born into absolute luxury, who never knew the struggle of building an empire, only the privilege of inheriting one. He's a man of arrogance, not achievement. While his grandfather was a warrior who eventually learned to fear God, Belshazzar is a playboy who fears nothing. But he should be afraid. Outside the massive double walls of Babylon, a storm has gathered. The armies of the Medes and the Persians, led by the legendary Cyrus the Great and his general Darius, have surrounded the city. For months, the siege has been in place. The enemy campfires burn like a ring of fire in the distance. The drums of war echo in the night. By all logic, the city should be on high alert. The guards should be at their posts. The king should be in the war room. But Belshazzar is not worried. He looks at the walls of Babylon, walls so thick that chariot races are held on top of them, walls that have never been breached, and he laughs. He believes he is untouchable. He has enough food stored in the city to last for 20 years. The Euphrates River flows right through the center of the city, providing an endless supply of water. In his mind, the Persians can wait outside until they rot. He is safe. So, on the night of October 12th, 539 BC, instead of preparing for battle, King Belshazzar decides to throw a party. The Bible tells us he made a great feast to 1,000 of his lords, and drank wine before the 1,000. Imagine the scale of this event. The great banquet hall of Babylon, lit by thousands of oil lamps, smelling of roasted meats and expensive perfumes. The elite of the empire are there. The politicians, the generals, the concubines, the wealthy merchants. It is a display of defiant excess. While the enemy waits at the gate, Babylon dances. It is the definition of hubris. But as the wine flowed and the king became intoxicated, a dark idea entered his mind. It wasn't enough to just party. He wanted to perform theater. He wanted to show his guests that he was greater than the gods of the nations his grandfather had conquered. Belshazzar, whilst he tasted the wine, commanded to bring the golden and silver vessels which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken out of the temple which was in Jerusalem. This was a fatal error. These were not just cups. These were the consecrated vessels of the house of Yahweh. They had been crafted by Solomon. They had been used by the high priests to offer the blood of atonement. They were holy. For 70 years, even the pagan kings of Babylon had treated them with a superstitious respect, keeping them stored away in the treasure house of their god Marduk, God your God. They understood that you do not trifle with the sacred objects of conquered deities. But Belshazzar had no respect. He ordered them to be brought out so that the king and his princes, his wives, and his concubines might drink therein. The servants hurried to the vaults. They returned carrying the glittering gold and silver chalices. The music stopped for a moment as the king poured his wine into the sacred cup of the Lord. He raised it high. And then the ultimate blasphemy occurred. They drank wine and praised the gods of gold and of silver, of brass, of iron, of wood, and of stone. They used the vessels of the Creator to toast the idols of the creation. They mocked the God of Israel. They were saying, "Where is your God now? We hold his cups in our hands. We drink his wine. He is nothing." It was a deliberate act of sacrilege. It was a direct challenge to heaven. And God accepted the challenge. In the same hour came forth fingers of a man's hand, and wrote over against the candlestick upon the plaster of the wall of the king's palace. It happened in an instant. The laughter died. The music screeched to a halt. A hush fell over the banquet hall, a silence so heavy it felt like a physical weight. Every eye turned to the wall near the lampstand, where the light was brightest. There was no body, no arm, just fingers. Floating, disembodied fingers of a man's hand, moving across the white plaster. The sound of the writing, the scratching of the supernatural stylus against the wall, must have echoed in the silence. The king saw the part of the hand that wrote. The reaction of Belshazzar is described with terrifying physical precision. This arrogant young man who moments ago was mocking God completely collapsed. The Bible says the king's countenance was changed, and his thoughts troubled him, so that the joints of his loins were loosed, and his knees smote one against another. This is the ancient way of saying he lost all physical control. His face went pale as a sheet. His hip joints gave way, meaning he couldn't stand up. His knees were literally knocking together in terror. The facade of power evaporated. He was just a frightened boy staring at the judgment of God. The hand finished writing and vanished, leaving behind 4 mysterious words burned into the plaster. A coded message from the court of heaven. Panic erupted. The king cried aloud to bring in the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the soothsayers. Once again, the wise men of Babylon were summoned to solve a riddle they could not understand. Belshazzar offered a massive reward. Whosoever shall read this writing, and show me the interpretation thereof, shall be clothed with scarlet, and have a chain of gold about his neck, and shall be the 3rd ruler in the kingdom. Why the 3rd ruler? Because Belshazzar himself was the 2nd ruler. His father Nebuchadnezzar was the 1st but was away from the city. He was offering the highest position available, the number 2 spot in the government. The wise men stared at the wall. They saw the letters. They might have even recognized the Aramaic characters. But they could not make sense of it. Was it a riddle? Was it an anagram? The words were there, but the meaning was locked. They were blind to the spiritual reality. The king's terror deepened. The lords were astonished. The party had turned into a funeral wake. Then, the doors of the banquet hall opened. A woman entered. The Bible calls her the queen, but she was likely the queen mother, perhaps the widow of Nebuchadnezzar or the mother of Belshazzar. She was an older woman who carried the memory of the empire's golden days. She was not drunk. She was not part of the blasphemy. She heard the screaming and came to take control. She walked up to the trembling king and spoke with the authority of history. "O king, live forever. Let not thy thoughts trouble thee. There's a man in thy kingdom, in whom is the spirit of the holy gods. There is a man." For years, Daniel had been forgotten. The new administration of Belshazzar had no use for an elderly Jewish prophet who talked about righteousness. Daniel had likely been retired, pushed to the sidelines, ignored by the new generation of politicians. But when the crisis came, the world suddenly needed the man of God again. "In the days of thy father," the queen continued, Light and understanding and wisdom, like the wisdom of the gods, was found in him. She reminded Belshazzar of the history he had ignored. She reminded him of Nebuchadnezzar. She spoke the name that commanded respect. Now let Daniel be called, and he will show the interpretation. So Daniel was brought in before the king. Imagine the contrast. On one side, the young drunken king, dressed in scarlet, surrounded by his terrified sycophants, trembling in his chair. On the other side, Daniel Datai. He is now an old man, perhaps in his 80s. His hair is white. He walks with the slow dignity of a man who has walked with God for a lifetime. He looks at the scene, the drunken lords, the pagan idols, and then he sees the vessels. He sees the holy cups of his God stained with the wine of Babylon. His eyes must have flashed with a holy anger. Belshazzar tries to buy him. He repeats the offer. If thou canst read the writing, thou shalt be clothed with scarlet, and have a chain of gold about thy neck, and shalt be the third ruler in the kingdom. Daniel's response is sharp and immediate. He cuts through the flattery like a knife. Let thy gifts be to thyself, and give thy rewards to another. Yet I will read the writing unto the king, and make known to him the interpretation. Daniel cannot be bought. He doesn't want the gold. He doesn't want the power. He knows that being the third ruler of a sinking ship is meaningless. He is there to deliver a verdict, not to negotiate a contract. But before he reads the writing, Daniel delivers a sermon. He forces Belshazzar to look at the history he refused to learn. O thou king, the Most High God gave Nebuchadnezzar thy father a kingdom, and majesty, and glory, and honor. He recounts the story of chapter 4, the greatness of Nebuchadnezzar, his pride, his madness, his eating of grass, and his eventual restoration. He reminds Belshazzar that even the greatest king in history had to bow to God. And then he points a bony finger at Belshazzar and delivers the indictment. And thou his son, O Belshazzar, hast not humbled thine heart, though thou knewest all this. This is the key. Though thou knewest all this. Belshazzar's sin was not ignorance. It was willful rebellion. He knew the stories. He knew what happened to his grandfather. But he chose to ignore it. He committed the sin of presumptuous pride. But hast lifted up thyself against the Lord of heaven, and they have brought the vessels of his house before thee, and thou hast praised the gods of silver and gold, which see not, nor hear, nor know, and the God in whose hand thy breath is, and whose are all the— What a description of human frailty. The God in whose hand thy breath is. Every breath Belshazzar took was a gift from the very God he was mocking. Then was the part of the hand sent from him, and this writing was written. Daniel turns to the wall. The room falls silent. The old prophet reads the Aramaic words that have been burning into the plaster. Menain, Mene, Tekel, a parson. These were units of weight and money. A mina, a shekel, and a half mina danu. To the natural mind, it sounded like a grocer's list. Numbered, weighed, divided. But Daniel saw the spiritual interpretation. Men, God hath numbered thy kingdom and finished it. The days of your empire were counted on a calendar by God, and the time is up. The lease has expired. There is no extension. The countdown has reached 0. Tekel, thou art weighed in the balances, and art found wanting. God has put your life on his cosmic scale. On one side, he put his law and his expectations. On the other side, he put your character. And you are too light. You lack substance. You lack righteousness. You are hollow. Paris, the singular of a parson, thy kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians. The judgment is final. The empire is being ripped from your hands and handed over to the enemy at the gate. The message was a death sentence. It was the end of the Babylonian Empire. Amazingly, Belshazzar kept his word. Perhaps he was in shock. Perhaps he thought that by rewarding the prophet, he could appease the God of the prophet. He commanded that they clothe Daniel with scarlet, and put a chain of gold about his neck, and made a proclamation concerning him, that that he should be the third ruler in the kingdom. Daniel accepted the robe, but he knew it didn't matter. The third ruler of Babylon would only hold office for a few hours. For that same night, history shifted. While the party was raging, while the king was trembling, the Persian engineers outside had done the impossible. They had dug canals upstream and diverted the flow of the mighty Euphrates River. The water level dropped. The riverbed, which flowed under the massive walls of Babylon, became a muddy highway. Historical accounts from Xenophon and Herodotus tell us that the Persian soldiers waded through the thigh-deep water, marching under the iron gates that had been left unguarded by the drunken soldiers. They entered the city like ghosts. Babylon was so massive that when the outer edges of the city were being slaughtered, the center of the city was still partying, unaware that they had already fallen. The Persians swept through the streets. The guards were cut down where they stood. The Bible records the end with brutal brevity. In that night was Belshazzar the king of the Chaldeans slain. And Darius the Median took the kingdom, being about 62 years old. The party ended in blood. The golden cup of the Lord was dropped on the floor as the Persian swords pierced the heart of the king. The head of gold was severed. The chest and arms of silver had arrived. Just as Daniel had interpreted in the dream of the statue decades earlier, the Second Empire had risen. The word of God was proven true to the exact letter. Daniel survived. The man who had served the head of gold would now serve the chest of silver. Regimes change, kings fall. Maps are redrawn, but the man of God remains standing, and the word of God remains sure. This chapter stands as a terrifying warning to nations and individuals who believe they are too big to fail. It reminds us that we are all weighed in the balances. It reminds us that our breath is in God's hand. And it reminds us that the writing is on the wall for any civilization that mocks the Creator. Babylon fell in a single night because they thought they were safe when they were actually under judgment. They were drinking from the holy vessels when they should have been repenting in sackcloth. But for Daniel, the change in government brought new dangers. The Persians were different from the Babylonians. They had different laws, different customs, and different jealousies. And soon, the old prophet would face his greatest test yet. Not a test of intellect, but a test of persecution. A test that would lead him to a pit filled with lions. Join us next time for Chapter 6, the most famous story of them all. The Lion's Den. This is the book of Daniel. Chapter 6, The Lion's Den. The pages of history have turned. The golden head of Babylon has fallen, severed by the sword of Cyrus the Great. The silver chest and arms of the Medo-Persian Empire have taken command of the world. We are no longer in the erratic emotional court of Nebuchadnezzar, nor the drunken, chaotic banquet of Belshazzar. We have entered a new era of cold, bureaucratic efficiency. The Persians are rulers of law, order, and immense administrative complexity. The city of Babylon still stands, its walls intact, but its masters have changed. King Darius the Mede now sits on the throne. He is a pragmatic ruler, a man who understands that conquering a kingdom is easy, but governing it is hard. To manage this vast sprawling empire, which encompasses hundreds of languages and cultures, Darius institutes a new organizational structure. He divides the kingdom into 120 princes, or satraps, who are stationed throughout the whole kingdom. These are the governors, the tax collectors, the regional managers of the empire. But who watches the watchers? Darius knows that corruption is the cancer of government. So, over these 120 princes, he appoints 3 presidents. These 3 men are the supreme chancellors of the realm. Their job is to audit the accounts, ensure the taxes are paid, and protect the king from damage. And among these 3 presidents, one name stands out. A name that has survived the rise and fall of dynasties. Daniel. Daniel is now an old man, likely in his early 80s. His hair is white as snow. His body is frail with age, but his mind is as sharp as a double-edged sword. He has served the kings of Babylon for nearly 70 years, and now the new Persian conquerors have recognized his genius. The Bible says that Daniel was preferred above the presidents and princes because an excellent spirit was in him, and the king thought to set him over the whole realm. This is an extraordinary statement. A Jewish captive, a foreigner, a man from a defeated nation, is about to be made the prime minister of the Persian Empire. He is about to become the second most powerful man in the world, answering only to the king himself. But excellence breeds envy. In the dark corridors of power, success is a target. The other presidents and the 120 princes look at Daniel with hatred. They are likely younger men, ambitious Persians and Medes who believe they deserve the power. They despise the fact that they have to answer to this elderly Hebrew exile. They hate his integrity. They hate that he cannot be bribed. They hate that he audits their books and stops them from stealing from the treasury. So, the conspiracy begins. It starts as a political investigation. The princes and presidents gather in secret to dig up dirt on Daniel. They launch a forensic audit of his life. They go through his records, his judgments, his financial dealings. They are looking for a scandal. They are looking for embezzlement. They are looking for a single mistake, a forgotten receipt, a moment of negligence. But they find nothing. The scripture records their frustration. They could find none occasion nor fault. For as much as he was faithful, neither was there any error or fault found in him. Think about that. After decades in high political office, a place where compromise is usually the currency of survival, Daniel is clean. He is blameless. He is flawless in his administration. His integrity is bulletproof. Realizing they cannot destroy him professionally, they decide to destroy him theologically. They realize that there is only one area of Daniel's life where he might disobey the king: his loyalty to his God. The conspirators say to one another, "We shall not find any occasion against this Daniel, except we find it against him concerning the law of his God." They hatch a diabolical plot. It is a trap designed to exploit the vanity of the king and the rigidity of Persian law. They draft a new piece of legislation, a royal statute. They approach King Darius in a large group, creating a sense of consensus and urgency. They use flattery as their weapon. "King Darius, live forever." They lie to the king, claiming that all the presidents of the kingdom, the governors and the princes, the counselors and the captains, have consulted together. This was a lie. All the presidents had not consulted together, because Daniel, the chief president, was not invited to the meeting. They deliberately excluded him. They present the decree to establish a royal statute and to make a firm decree that whosoever shall ask a petition of any god or man for 30 days save of thee, O king, he shall be cast into the den of lions. It was a masterstroke of manipulation. For the king, this sounded like a good idea. The empire was new. There were potential rebellions. By forcing everyone to pray only to the king for 30 days, it would unify the kingdom. It would solidify Darius's authority. It made the king the temporary mediator between heaven and earth. It appealed to his ego. But there was a catch. Under the legal system of this empire, once a law was signed by the king, it became the law of the Medes and Persians, which altereth not. It could not be changed, not even by the king himself. Once the wax seal was broken, the law was absolute. It was a constitutional trap. Darius, unaware of the target on Daniel's back, signed the writing and the decree. The trap was set. The ink was dry. The warrant was active. Now, the camera shifts to Daniel. He is not in the palace. He is in his home. He hears the news. The town criers are shouting the new law in the streets. No prayer to any god but Darius for 30 days. Penalty, death by lions. Daniel knows exactly what this means. He knows it is aimed at him. He knows that if he prays, he dies. He has a choice. He could stop praying for 30 days. It's only a month. God knows his heart, right? Or he could pray secretly. He could close his windows, hide in a closet, and whisper his prayers where no one can see. He could be a secret believer. But Daniel does neither. Now when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went into his house, and his windows being open in his chamber toward Jerusalem, he kneeled upon his knees 3 times a day, and prayed and gave thanks before his God, as he did aforetime. This is defiance. But it is not the defiance of a rebel. It is the consistency of a saint. Daniel does not change his routine by 1 inch. He goes to his upper room. He opens the windows, not to show off, but because he always prayed facing Jerusalem, the city of God. He gets on his knees, and he prays. The text says he did as he did aforetime. He didn't start a protest prayer meeting. He didn't pray louder. He simply refused to let the king of Persia dictate his relationship with the king of heaven. He prayed 3 times a day, morning, noon, and night. The conspirators were waiting. They knew his schedule. They were watching his house, hiding in the shadows. And sure enough, the windows opened. They saw the old man kneel. They heard his voice. They had him. They rushed back to the king, their faces flushed with victory. "Hast thou not signed a decree?" they asked, locking the king into his own law. Darius answered, "The thing is true, according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which altereth not." Then they dropped the blade. "That Daniel, which is of the children of the captivity of Judah, regardeth not thee, O king, nor the decree that thou hast signed, but maketh his petition 3 times a day." Notice the insult. They don't call him the president. They call him that Daniel of the captivity. They label him a slave, an outsider. When the king heard these words, he was sore displeased with himself. Darius realized instantly that he had been played. He realized that the law he signed to boost his ego was actually a weapon to kill his best friend. He loved Daniel. He respected Daniel. The Bible gives us a touching picture of the king's desperation. He set his heart on Daniel to deliver him, and he labored till the going down of the sun to deliver him. Imagine the scene in the throne room. The most powerful man on earth is frantically pacing back and forth, calling his lawyers, calling his scribes, looking for a loophole, looking for a technicality. He argues with the princes. He tries to find a way to veto his own law. But the system is rigid. The constitution of the Medes and Persians is ironclad. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the palace floor, the conspirators closed in. They were relentless. "Know, O king, that the law of the Medes and Persians is, that no decree or statute which the king establisheth may be changed." Time had run out. The law was supreme. The king was trapped. With a heavy heart, Darius gave the command. Soldiers were sent to arrest the 80-year-old statesman. They marched him out of his house, through the streets of Babylon, to the place of execution. The lion's den was likely a large underground pit or cavern, covered with a heavy stone and a grate. Inside, kept hungry for days, were royal lions. These were not tame animals. They were execution machines, designed to tear a human body to pieces before it even hit the floor. They brought Daniel to the mouth of the pit. The king stood there, looking at his faithful servant. And then, Darius the pagan king speaks words of incredible faith. "Thy God whom thou servest continually, he will deliver thee." It was a prayer. It was a hope. Even the pagan king knew that Daniel's God was different. They cast Daniel into the den. The darkness swallowed him. Then a stone was brought and laid upon the mouth of the den. And the king sealed it with his own signet, and with the signet of his lords. This was the final lock. The wax seal meant that if anyone moved the stone to save Daniel, they would be executed for breaking the king's seal. Daniel was buried alive. The king went to his palace, but it was a house of mourning. He passed the night fasting. Neither were instruments of music brought before him, and his sleep went from him. While the conspirators were likely celebrating, toasting their victory, the king was in agony. He paced the floors. He stared out the window. He waited for the dawn. But what was happening inside the den? The Bible is silent on the details of that night inside the pit. We are left to imagine the scene. The heavy thud of Daniel landing on the dusty floor. The smell of decay and death. The glowing yellow eyes in the darkness. The low, guttural growls of hungry beasts surrounding him. By all laws of nature, Daniel should have been eaten instantly. But Daniel was not alone. Just as there was a fourth man in the fire, there was a visitor in the den. The night passed slowly. The sun began to rise over the horizon of Babylon. Then the king arose very early in the morning, and went in haste unto the den of lions. Darius didn't send a servant to check. He ran himself. He ran with the desperation of a man who needed a miracle. He came to the den and cried with a lamentable voice. He didn't expect an answer. He expected silence. He expected to find only scattered bones and blood-stained rags. O Daniel, servant of the living God, is thy God, whom thou servest continually, able to deliver thee from the lions? It is the question of the ages. Is God able? Is he able to save when the law says death? Is he able to save when the lions are hungry? Is he able to save when the stone is sealed? For a moment, there was silence. And then, from the depths of the earth, a calm, steady voice replied, O King, live forever. Daniel was alive. His voice was strong. He wasn't screaming. He wasn't crying. He was greeting the king with proper protocol. My God hath sent his angel, and hath shut the lions' mouths, that they have not hurt me. Forasmuch as before him innocency was found in me, and also before thee, O king, have I done no hurt. The miracle was complete. God had sent an angel, perhaps the same angel of the Lord, to act as a muzzle. The lions, the apex predators, had been turned into harmless kittens. They likely sat around Daniel, keeping him warm through the night. Daniel had spent the night in a cathedral of fir, worshipping the God who controls nature. The king was exceeding glad. He commanded that they should take Daniel up out of the den. Ropes were lowered. The old man was hoisted into the morning light. The royal physicians and the crowd inspected him. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no manner of hurt was found upon him, because he believed in his God. Not a scratch, not a bite mark, not a bruise. Faith had neutralized the teeth of the beasts. But the story does not end with deliverance. It ends with justice. The God of the Bible is a God of salvation, but he is also a God of judgment. The conspiracy against Daniel was a capital crime. They had maliciously manipulated the king and attempted to murder an innocent high official. The king commanded, and they brought those men which had accused Daniel, and they cast them into the den of lions. This is a brutal scene, but it serves a specific historical purpose. Skeptics might have said, oh, the lions weren't hungry. They were old. They were sick. That's why they didn't eat Daniel. But the fate of the accusers proves the miracle. The text says, and the lions had the mastery of them, and brake all their bones in pieces or ever they came at the bottom of the den. The moment the protection of the angel was removed, the nature of the lions returned. They were ravenous. They leaped into the air and caught the conspirators before they even hit the ground. The difference between life and death was not the appetite of the lions. It was the presence of the angel. Darius, shaken to his core by what he had witnessed, sat down to write a decree. Just like Nebuchadnezzar before him, the Persian king became an evangelist. He wrote to all people, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth. I make a decree that in every dominion of my kingdom men tremble and fear before the God of Daniel. For he is the living God, and steadfast forever, and his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed, and his dominion shall be even unto the end. He delivereth and rescueth, and he worketh signs and wonders in heaven and in earth, who hath delivered Daniel from the power of the lions. The chapter closes with a summary of Daniel's career. So this Daniel prospered in the reign of Darius and in the reign of Cyrus the Persian. He had outlived the lions. He had outlived the conspirators. He had outlived the kings who tried to kill him. From a teenage slave in chapter 1 to an 80-year-old prime minister in chapter 6, Daniel stood as a monument to the faithfulness of God. He showed the world that you can live in Babylon without becoming Babylonian. You can serve in a corrupt government without becoming corrupt. And you can face the roaring lions of this world if you keep your windows open toward Jerusalem. This concludes the historical narrative portion of the book of Daniel. We have seen his life, his trials, and his victories. But the book is not over. In fact, the most mysterious and profound section is just beginning. Starting in chapter 7, the camera moves away from the history of the courts and into the visions of the night. We are leaving the timeline of Daniel's life and entering the timeline of the end of the world. We will see beasts rising from the sea. We will see the Ancient of Days sitting on his throne. We will see the Son of Man coming with the clouds of heaven. The history lesson is finished. The prophecy is about to begin. Join us next time for chapter 7, where the veil of time is torn open and Daniel sees the future of the human race. This is the book of Daniel. Chapter 7, the vision of the four beasts. We have arrived at the Great Divide. Up until this moment, the book of Daniel has been a biography. We have walked the dusty streets of Babylon, sat in the royal courts of Nebuchadnezzar, witnessed the madness of kings, and stood in the silence of the lion's den. We have read the history of Daniel the man. But now, the history book closes, and the book of the Apocalypse opens. We are leaving the timeline of the past to enter the timeline of the future. From chapter 7 onward, the camera is no longer focused on Daniel's life, but on Daniel's visions. We are stepping into the Holy of Holies of Bible prophecy. This chapter is the skeletal structure upon which the entire book of Revelation is built. Without Daniel chapter 7, we cannot understand the end times. To understand this vision, we must rewind the clock. Chronologically, chapter 7 does not happen after the lion's den. It takes us back in time to the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon. This is decades before the fall of the empire. Daniel is an old man, but Babylon is still standing. The party of chapter 5 has not happened yet. The writing is not yet on the wall. Daniel is lying in his bed in the palace. The city sleeps. But Daniel cannot sleep. The God of heaven pulls back the curtain of reality and shows his servant a panoramic video of human history, stretching from that night in Babylon all the way to the second coming of Jesus Christ. Daniel wrote the dream and told the sum of the matters. I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of the heaven strove upon the great sea. The vision begins with a storm. The Great Sea in the Bible usually refers to the Mediterranean, the center of the ancient world. But symbolically, in prophecy, the sea represents the mass of humanity, the nations, the peoples, the politics, and the chaos of human civilization. Isaiah 17:12 says, "Woe to the multitude of many people, which make a noise like the noise of the seas." Daniel sees the four winds of heaven fighting on the water. The number 4 represents the four corners of the earth. This is a global storm. It is a picture of the striving, the warring, and the turbulence of geopolitical history. Nations rise and fall in a sea of blood and conflict. And out of this chaotic ocean, 4 monsters emerge. And 4 great beasts came up from the sea, diverse one from another. In Daniel chapter 2, King Nebuchadnezzar saw these same 4 kingdoms. But remember, he saw them as a beautiful, shining statue. He saw a head of gold and a chest of silver. He saw human government as man sees it, majestic, valuable, and glorious. But now, God shows Daniel the same kingdoms from heaven's perspective. God does not see a shiny statue. He sees wild animals. He sees predators. He sees beasts that devour, crush, and destroy. This is the divine commentary on human politics. The first beast, the winged lion. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. The lion is the king of the beasts. The eagle is the king of the birds. This represents the empire of Babylon. It corresponds perfectly to the head of gold in the statue. Even the archaeology of Babylon confirms this. The Ishtar gate was lined with lions. Jeremiah 4:7 refers to Babylon as the lion is come up from his thicket. But this lion is supernatural. It has wings. This represents the speed of Nebuchadnezzar's conquests. He flew across the ancient world, destroying Assyria and Egypt with terrifying swiftness. But then Daniel watches the beast change. I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth, and made stand upon the feet as a man, and a man's heart was given to it. This is a direct reference to the madness of Nebuchadnezzar we studied in chapter 4. His wings, his ability to conquer, were plucked when God struck him with insanity. He was humbled. But then he was lifted up and given a man's heart. This represents his restoration and his conversion. Babylon was a fierce predator, but under Nebuchadnezzar's final years, it became more humane, tamed by the knowledge of the true God. The second beast, the lumpy bear. And behold another beast, a second, like to a bear, and it raised up itself on one side, and it had 3 ribs in the mouth of it between the teeth of it. The lion fades, and out of the foaming sea comes a bear. This corresponds to the chest and arms of silver, the Medo-Persian Empire. A bear is slower than a lion, but it is stronger. It relies on brute force. The Persian armies were not known for speed. They were known for size. They would overwhelm their enemies with millions of soldiers, crushing them like a giant bear hug. Notice the details. The bear is raised up on one side. This is historically precise. The empire was a dual alliance between the Medes and the Persians. But the Persians, the raised side, became much stronger and more dominant than the Medes. And the 3 ribs in the mouth? These represent the 3 major kingdoms that Medo-Persia devoured to gain world power: Lydia, Babylon, and Egypt. The command is given to the bear: arise, devour much flesh. This was an empire with a voracious appetite for territory, expanding far beyond the borders of Babylon. The third beast, the 4-headed leopard. After this I beheld, and lo another, like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl. The beast had also 4 heads, and a dominion was given to it. The bear lumbers away, and suddenly a leopard springs from the waves. This corresponds to the belly and thighs of bronze, the Greek Empire. A leopard is a fast predator, but this leopard has 4 wings. It is hyperspeed. This represents Alexander the Great. In only 10 or 12 years, Alexander marched his army from Greece to India, conquering the known world faster than any human had ever done before. He moved so fast that historians say he didn't just march, he flew. But notice the 4 heads. Alexander died young at the age of 32, with no heir. His massive empire did not go to his son. Instead, it was divided among his 4 top generals: Cassander, Lysimachus, Seleucus, and Ptolemy. 4 heads ruling one empire. The accuracy of this prophecy, written centuries before Alexander was born, is one of the greatest proofs of the divine inspiration of the Bible. The 4th beast, the nameless monster. After this I saw in the night visions, and behold a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, and strong exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with the feet of it, and it was diverse from all the beasts. When Daniel sees the 4th beast, he runs out of zoology. He cannot call it a lion, a bear, or a leopard. There is no animal on earth to compare it to. It is a Jurassic monster. It is a machine of pure destruction. This corresponds to the legs of iron, the Roman Empire. Rome was dreadful and terrible. It possessed a military machine that was unlike anything the world had seen. It had iron teeth, matching the iron legs of the statue. Rome didn't just conquer nations, it devoured them. It erased cultures. It assimilated everything into its own image. The Pax Romana. What it couldn't eat, it stamped with the feet of it. This represents the utter crushing of rebellion. Rome is the empire that nailed the Son of God to a cross. It is the empire that destroyed Jerusalem in 70 AD. But the vision gets complicated here. The Roman Empire of history eventually fell apart. But Daniel sees something on this beast that goes beyond ancient history. And it had 10 horns. In Bible prophecy, a horn represents a king or a center of power. This beast has 10 of them. This corresponds to the 10 toes of the statue in chapter 2. This represents a future form of the Roman Empire, a coalition of 10 nations or 10 leaders that will arise out of the geography and culture of the old Roman Empire in the latter days. The little horn. Daniel zooms in. He is staring at the 10 horns, trying to understand. I considered the horns, and, behold, there came up among them another little horn, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. This is the central character of the end times. This little horn starts small, but it rises to absolute power. It is so aggressive that it destroys 3 of the original 10 leaders. And then, Daniel sees the terrifying nature of this little horn. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of man, and a mouth speaking great things. This is not just a political system. This is a person. He has eyes like a man. He possesses high intelligence, charisma, and insight. But he has a mouth speaking great things. In the Hebrew context, this means blasphemies. He speaks pompous words. He claims to be God. This is the Antichrist, the man of sin, the beast of Revelation 13. Daniel watches this tyrant rise to power, speaking against the Most High, wearing out the saints, and thinking to change times and laws. The courtroom of heaven. Just as the terror of the little horn reaches its peak, the scene shifts violently. Daniel is ripped from the chaos of the sea to the stillness of the throne room. I beheld till the thrones were cast down, and the Ancient of Days did sit. This is one of the most majestic titles for God in the entire Bible, the Ancient of Days. It speaks of his eternity. He was here before the chaos began, and he will be here after it ends. His garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head like the pure wool. This symbolizes his absolute purity and wisdom. He is the holy judge. His throne was like the fiery flame, and his wheels as burning fire. God's throne is not static, it is a chariot of fire, reminiscent of Ezekiel's vision. Fire represents judgment. It represents a God who is active and moving. A fiery stream issued and came forth from before him. Thousands ministered unto him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. Millions of angels surround the throne. The court is in session. The atmosphere is thick with awe and terror. The judgment was set, and the books were opened. This is the supreme court of the universe. The little horn on earth is boasting, bragging, and blaspheming, thinking he rules the world. But in heaven, the books are open. Every word he speaks is recorded. His sentence is already written. Daniel looks back at the earth. I beheld then, because of the voice of the great words which the horn spake. I beheld even till the beast was slain, and his body destroyed, and given to the burning flame. It happens in an instant. The Antichrist does not fade away. He is not voted out of office. He is executed by divine decree. The fiery stream from the throne consumes the fourth beast, the Son of Man. Then Daniel sees the climax of human history. I saw in the night visions, and, behold, one like the Son of Man came with the clouds of heaven, and came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him. Who is this Son of Man? It is Jesus Christ. This is the title Jesus used for himself more than any other. Over 80 times in the Gospels. He was telling the Jewish people, I am the one Daniel sought. Notice the direction. He comes with the clouds of heaven. He goes to the Ancient of Days. This is the coronation of the King. And there was given him dominion, and glory, and a kingdom, that all people, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away, and his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed. The head of gold passed away, the silver passed, the bronze passed, the iron passed, the little horn passed, but the kingdom of the Son of Man shall never pass away. This is the stone that strikes the statue. This is the return of Christ to rule the earth. The interpretation. Daniel is overwhelmed. The vision is too much for him. Daniel was grieved in my spirit, and the visions of my head troubled me. He approaches one of the angels standing by the throne and asks for the truth. The angel explains, "These great beasts, which are four kings, which shall arise out of the earth. But the saints of the Most High shall take the kingdom, and possess the kingdom forever, even forever and ever." This is the bottom line. The beasts will rise, but the saints will win. But Daniel is not satisfied with the general summary. He is obsessed with the fourth beast. He wants to know about the 10 horns and the little horn with the big mouth. He wants to know about the Antichrist. "I beheld, and the same horn made war with the saints and prevailed against them." This is a chilling verse. There is a time coming, the great tribulation, when the Antichrist will wage a physical and spiritual war against the believers, and purely from a physical standpoint he will prevail. He will martyr them. He will crush them. It will look like evil has won. Until the Ancient of Days came. That is the most important word in the chapter. Until. Evil wins until God stands up. The Antichrist prevails until the court sits in judgment. And judgment was given to the saints of the Most High, and the time came that the saints possessed the kingdom. The angel gives Daniel specific details about the Antichrist's reign. He shall speak great words against the Most High. Blasphemy. He shall wear out the saints of the Most High. Persecution. He shall think to change times and laws. He will try to alter the moral order of creation and the appointed feasts of God. They shall be given into his hand until a time and times, and the dividing of time. This phrase, time, times, and a dividing of time, is a prophetic code. Time equals 1 year. Times 2 years. Dividing of time, UAG, 0.5 years. Total, 3.5 years. This corresponds exactly to the 42 months or 1260 days mentioned in the book of Revelation. It is the second half of the tribulation, the time of Jacob's trouble. It is a specific, limited time allowed by God. The Antichrist has an expiration date. The end of the matter. The chapter concludes with the final verdict. But the judgment shall sit, and they shall take away his dominion, to consume and to destroy it unto the end. The kingdom is not given to the politicians. It is not given to the rich. It is not given to the armies of the world. And the kingdom and dominion, and the greatness of the kingdom under the whole heaven, shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High. You, the believers, the ones who were thrown to the lions, the ones who walked through the fire, the ones who refused to bow. You inherit the earth. The meek shall inherit the earth. Daniel's reaction to all of this is telling. He doesn't celebrate. He is shaken to his core. Hitherto is the end of the matter. As for me, Daniel, my cogitations much troubled me, and my countenance changed in me. But I kept the matter in my heart. Daniel saw the bloodshed. He saw the lions and the bears and the terrifying machine of Rome. He saw the Antichrist slaughtering the saints. He saw the horror of human history. It made him sick. It made him pale. But he also saw the Ancient of Days sitting on the throne. He saw the fire. He saw the Son of Man coming on the clouds. This vision teaches us a fundamental truth. Human history is a violent, chaotic sea. Governments will become more beastly as time goes on. They will devour and destroy. But above the stormy sea, there is a throne that is unshakable. There is a judge who is incorruptible. and there is a king who is coming to take back what is his. The beasts have their day, but the saints have eternity. As we move forward in the book, the focus will narrow. We have seen the global overview. Now in chapter 8, God will zoom in on the second and third beasts, the ram and the goat, to give us the precise details of the next war. Join us next time for chapter 8, the war of the ram and the goat. This is the book of Daniel. Chapter 8, the ram, the goat, and the war of kings. We have traveled through the golden halls of Babylon, witnessed the fiery furnace, survived the lion's den, and stood on the shores of the great sea, watching the monsters of history rise from the chaos. But now, the scene changes. The atmosphere shifts from the chaotic, stormy oceans of chapter 7 to the stark, vivid clarity of a desert landscape. The year is approximately 550 BC, 2 years after the vision of the four beasts. The Babylonian Empire is still standing, but it is crumbling. The writing is not yet on the wall for Belshazzar, but the sun is setting on the golden head. Daniel is now transported, whether in the body or out of the body, he does not know, to the palace of Shushan, Susa, in the province of Elamond. This is a fascinating detail. At the time of this vision, Shushan was just a provincial outpost. But Daniel, seeing the future, stands in the very citadel that would become the capital of the Persian Empire. The setting of the Book of Esther. Decades later, God places him in the headquarters of the next superpower before it even exists. He stands by the river Olai. The water flows quietly. The air is still. And then, the vision begins. The ram with 2 horns. Then I lifted up mine eyes, and saw, and behold, there stood before the river a ram which had 2 horns. In the ancient world, the ram was the national symbol of the Persian Empire. Just as the bald eagle represents the United States or the lion represents Great Britain, the ram appeared on Persian coins and in their architecture. The guardian spirit of the Persian kingdom was often depicted as a ram with sharp horns. Daniel observes the anatomy of this beast carefully. And the 2 horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher came up last. This is historical precision at its finest. The empire was a dual monarchy, the Medes and the Persians. The Medes rose first, the shorter horn, but the Persians rose later and became the dominant power. The higher horn, Cyrus the Great, a Persian, would eventually overshadow his Median partners. I saw the ram pushing westward, and northward, and southward, so that no beasts might stand before him. Neither was there any that could deliver out of his hand, but he did according to his will, and became great. This describes the irresistible military expansion of the Medo-Persian Empire. Westward, they conquered Babylon, Syria, and Asia Minor. Northward, they conquered Armenia and the Caspian regions. Southward, they conquered Egypt and Ethiopia. For 200 years, the ram did according to his will. It seemed unstoppable. It fielded armies of over 1 million men. It was a juggernaut of sheer size and strength. The he-goat from the west. And as I was considering, behold, an he-goat came from the west on the face of the whole earth, and touched not the ground. While Daniel is watching the ram strut proudly by the river, he looks to the west, toward Europe, toward Greece. He sees a goat. But this is not a normal animal. It is moving with supernatural speed. The text says it touched not the ground. It was flying. This represents the lightning-fast blitzkrieg of the Greek armies. And the goat had a notable horn between his eyes. This notable horn, or great horn, is Alexander the Great. There is no ambiguity here. History tells us that Alexander conquered the known world in roughly 12 years. He marched his troops thousands of miles, often moving faster than the news of his arrival could travel. He was a military genius, a unicorn of history, a single horn of focused, deadly power. The collision. And he came to the ram that had 2 horns, and ran unto him in the fury of his power. This is the battle of Gaugamela, 331 BC. And the battle of Granicus prophesied centuries before they happened. It was the clash of civilizations. East versus West. The massive, slow-moving ram. Persia versus the agile, furious goat. Greece T. And I saw him come close unto the ram, and he was moved with choler against him, and smote the ram, and brake his two horns, and there was no power in the ram to stand before him. Choler means bitter anger or rage. Alexander didn't just want to defeat Persia, he wanted to destroy it. The Greeks were seeking revenge for the previous Persian invasions of Greece. The wars of Marathon and Thermopylae. The goat slammed into the ram. The two horns, Media and Persia, were shattered. He cast him down to the ground and stamped upon him, and there was none that could deliver the ram out of his hand. The Persian Empire, which had ruled for 2 centuries, collapsed in a heartbeat. Alexander took the capital, burned the palace of Persepolis, and became the master of the world. The broken horn and the 4 successors. Therefore the he-goat waxed very great, and when he was strong, the great horn was broken. This is one of the most tragic verses in secular history. When he was strong. Alexander did not die in old age. He did not die in defeat. He died at the absolute peak of his power, at the age of 32, likely in the palace of Babylon. He conquered the world but could not conquer his own mortality. The great horn snapped off, and for it came up 4 notable ones toward the 4 winds of heaven. With Alexander dead and no heir to take the throne, his massive empire was thrown into chaos. After years of civil war, the wars of the Diadochi, the empire was divided among his 4 top generals, exactly as the prophecy predicted. Cassander took Macedonia and Greece. The west. Lysimachus took Thrace and Asia Minor. The north. Seleucus took Syria and the massive eastern territory. The east. Ptolemy took Egypt and North Africa. The south. 4 horns replacing the 1. The little horn of chapter 8. Now, the vision zooms in. Daniel is not interested in Greek history for the sake of history. He is looking for something specific. He looks at the 4 horns, and out of one of them came forth a little horn, which waxed exceeding great, toward the south, and toward the east, and toward the pleasant land. We must be careful here. In chapter 7, we saw a little horn rising from the Roman Empire. The Antichrist. Here in chapter 8, we see a little horn rising from the Greek Empire. The Seleucid line. Bible scholars call this man the Antichrist of the Old Testament. He is a historical figure who serves as the perfect prototype, the foreshadowing of the final Antichrist to come. His name was Antiochus IV, Epiphanes. He rose from the Seleucid dynasty, one of the 4 horns. He was a madman. He called himself Epiphanes, which means God manifest. The Jews, using a play on words, called him Epimanes, which means the madman. The prophecy says he waxed great toward the pleasant land. That is Israel. Israel is the geographic center of God's affection. Antiochus was obsessed with Hellenizing the Jews, turning them into Greeks. He wanted to eradicate the worship of Yahweh. And it waxed great, even to the host of heaven. And it cast down some of the host and of the stars to the ground, and stamped upon them. In prophetic language, stars often refer to the people of God or the leaders of Israel. Genesis 37:9 just. Antiochus launched a brutal persecution against the Jewish priesthood and the faithful believers. He slaughtered thousands in Jerusalem. Yea, he magnified himself even to the prince of the host, and by him the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. This is the crime of the ages. In 167 BC, Antiochus marched into Jerusalem. He entered the holy temple. He forbade the Jewish daily sacrifices. And then, in an act of ultimate desecration, he erected a statue of Zeus in the Holy of Holies and sacrificed a pig on the altar of God. He took the blood of an unclean animal and splashed it on the holy vessels. This was the abomination of desolation. It was an attempt to murder the religion of Judaism. He burned the Torah scrolls. He made circumcision punishable by death. Mothers who circumcised their sons were thrown off the city walls with their babies tied to their necks. It was a time of darkness such as Israel had never seen. The holy conversation. In the vision, Daniel suddenly hears a conversation between two angels. Then I heard one saint speaking, and another saint said unto that certain saint which spake, How long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice, and the transgression of desolation? The angels are asking the question that was on Daniel's heart. How long? How long will God allow this madman to trample his house? How long will the pig blood stain the altar? And he said unto me, Unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. 2,300 evenings and mornings. This literally refers to the timeline of the persecution under Antiochus Epiphanes, from the beginning of his oppression until the liberation of the temple by the Maccabees. The events celebrated today as Hanukkah. The timeline fits. God had set a limit. The sanctuary would be cleansed. The lamps would be lit again. The pig would be removed. Gabriel in the time of the end. The vision fades, and Daniel is left standing by the river, trembling. He seeks the meaning. And it came to pass, when even I, Daniel, had seen the vision, and sought for the meaning, then behold, there stood before me as the appearance of a man. This is not a man. This is an archangel. And I heard a man's voice between the banks of Ulai, which called and said, Gabriel, make this man to understand the vision. This is the first time in the Bible that an angel is named. Gabriel. The same angel who would later appear to Mary to announce the birth of Jesus. He is God's messenger of the Messiah and the end times. So he came near where I stood, and when he came, I was afraid and fell upon my face. The presence of the supernatural is overwhelming. Daniel collapses. But he said unto me, Understand, O Son of Man, for at the time of the end shall be the vision. This is crucial. While the vision describes Antiochus Epiphanes in the past, our history, Gabriel says it ultimately points to the time of the end. This is the law of double reference. Near fulfillment, Antiochus Epiphanes, 175, 164 BC. Far fulfillment, the Antichrist, the Great Tribulation. Antiochus is just the trailer. The Antichrist is the movie. Everything Antiochus did to the temple in Jerusalem, the coming Antichrist will do again. He will stop the sacrifices. He will set up an image. He will persecute the saints. Gabriel breaks it down clearly. The ram which thou sawest having two horns are the kings of Media and Persia, and the rough goat is the king of Grecia. And the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king, Alexander. God names the empires before they even rise. This is why critics hate the book of Daniel. They say, it's too accurate. It must have been written after the events happened. But we know it was written centuries before. The God who names the stars also names the kingdoms of men. The king of fierce countenance. Gabriel then describes this little horn, Antiochus, Antichrist, with terrifying detail. And in the latter time of their kingdom, a king of fierce countenance and understanding dark sentences shall stand up. Fierce countenance implies a man of intimidation, sternness, and unyielding cruelty. Understanding dark sentences implies he is a master of the occult, intrigue, and doublespeak. He is a master deceiver, and his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. This is a supernatural revelation. Antiochus was empowered by Satan. The coming Antichrist will be empowered by the dragon. Revelation 13:2-2. He is a puppet of hell, and he shall destroy wonderfully, and shall prosper, and practice, and shall destroy the mighty and the holy people. He will be a genius of destruction. He will target the holy people, the Jews, and the saints. And through his policy also he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand. Craft here means deceit or treachery. He will be a master politician. He will use peace treaties as weapons. As chapter 11 will tell us, by peace shall he destroy many. He shall also stand up against the prince of princes. This is the ultimate mistake. Antiochus stood up against God, and he died a miserable, diseased death, his body eaten by worms. The Antichrist will stand up against Jesus Christ, the Prince of Princes, at the battle of Armageddon, but he shall be broken without hand. Just as the stone cut without hands destroyed the statue, this evil king will not be assassinated by a human. He will be destroyed by the breath of the Lord's mouth. His end is supernatural. The sealing of the vision. Gabriel concludes the briefing. And the vision of the evening and morning which was told is true. Wherefore shut thou up the vision, for it shall be for many days. Daniel is told to preserve the document. It was not for his time. It was a time capsule for the Jewish people in the days of the Maccabees, and it is a time capsule for us today. The prophet's reaction. And I, Daniel, fainted, and was sick certain days. Afterward I rose up and did the king's business, and I was astonished at the vision, but none understood it. The burden of prophecy is heavy. Daniel saw the suffering of his people. He saw the pig on the altar. He saw the blood in the streets. It physically made him ill. He had to take sick leave from his duties as prime minister. This reveals the heart of a true intercessor. Prophecy is not a game of solving puzzles. It is a glimpse into the heart of God and the suffering of humanity. It should move us to tears before it moves us to debate. Conclusion. Chapter 8 stands as one of the undeniable pillars of biblical inspiration. The history of the ram and the goat is so precise that it reads like a history textbook, yet it was written when Babylon was still the mistress of the world. We have seen the ram push. We have seen the goat fly. We have seen the horn break. And we have seen the shadow of the dark king who is yet to come. But the story is not over. Daniel knows that Jeremiah the prophet predicted a 70-year captivity for the Jews. He knows the time is almost up. So, instead of waiting passively, Daniel decides to pray the prophecy into existence. Join us next time for Chapter 9, the most famous prayer in the Bible, and the revelation of the 70 weeks, the prophetic clock that counts down to the exact day of the death of Jesus Christ. This is the book of Daniel. Chapter 9, the 70 weeks, the countdown to the Messiah. The scene is quiet. We have left the noise of the battlefield and the roar of the lions. We are in the private chamber of an old man. The year is 538 BC, the first year of Darius the Mede. The Babylonian Empire is dead. The Persian Empire is young. And Daniel, now in his 80s, is doing what he has done every day for nearly 70 years. He is seeking the face of his God. But today is different. Daniel is not looking at a vision of beasts. He is not staring at a statue. He is looking at a scroll. It is an ancient parchment, worn at the edges, perhaps smelling of the smoke of a destroyed Jerusalem. It is the scroll of the prophet Jeremiah. Decades earlier, before the Babylonians burned the temple, Jeremiah had written a letter to the captives. He had made a specific, mathematical prediction. Daniel unrolls the scroll to Jeremiah chapter 25, verses 11 and 12. He reads the words by the flickering light of an oil lamp. And this whole land shall be a desolation and an astonishment, and these nations shall serve the king of Babylon 70 years. 70 years. Daniel stops. He does the math. He counts backward. He was taken captive in 605 BC, the first deportation. He looks at the calendar. It is now 538 BC. The time is almost up. The 70 years are expiring. This realization hits Daniel like a physical blow. Most men would have rejoiced. Most would have started packing their bags. Most would have run to the window and shouted, "We are going home." But Daniel does not pack. He does not celebrate. He falls to his knees. Why? Because Daniel understands a spiritual principle that most of us miss. Prophecy is not a reason to be passive. It is a reason to pray. He knew that God had promised to bring them back, But he also knew that the people were not ready. They were still living in sin. They were comfortable in Babylon. They had forgotten Zion Tari. Daniel realized that if the 70 years ended but the people's hearts were not changed, the restoration would be a failure. So, the prime minister of the Persian Empire, the man who answered only to the king, stripped off his royal robes. He put on sackcloth, scratching goat hair fabric that symbolized mourning. He took cold ash from the hearth and sprinkled it on his white hair. He stopped eating. He stopped drinking. He went to war, not with a sword but with a prayer. The great prayer of confession. What follows in verses 4 through 19 is one of the greatest prayers ever recorded in human history. It is a masterpiece of humility. Notice the pronouns. Daniel does not say, "Lord, they have sinned." He does not say, "Lord, look at these wicked Jews who won't listen." He says, "We have sinned and have committed iniquity and have done wickedly and have rebelled." Daniel includes himself. This is the man whom heaven called greatly beloved. This is the man against whom the corruption investigators could find no fault. Yet, he identifies himself with the sins of his people. He takes the burden of the nation's guilt upon his own shoulders. He acknowledges the justice of God. "O Lord, righteousness belongeth unto thee, but unto us confusion of faces." He admits that the exile was not an accident. It wasn't bad luck. It was the righteous judgment of a holy God against a covenant-breaking people. He quotes the law of Moses. He reminds God of the curses written in Deuteronomy that would fall upon Israel if they disobeyed. All this evil has come upon us, yet made we not our prayer before the Lord our God. But then, the tone shifts. He moves from confession to supplication. He appeals to God, not based on Israel's goodness, but based on God's reputation. "O Lord, hear, O Lord, forgive. O Lord, hearken and do. Defer not for thine own sake, O my God, for thy city and thy people are called by thy name." He is saying, "Lord, do it for your name. Your name is on Jerusalem. Your name is on us. The nations are laughing at you because your city is in ruins. Restore us so that the world will know you are God." It is a desperate, passionate, weeping plea. It is the sound of a man breaking his heart on the altar of intercession. The flight of Gabriel. And then, the answer comes. And it comes with terrifying speed. And whiles I was speaking, and praying, and confessing my sin, before he could even say amen, heaven was moving. The Bible says, "The man Gabriel, whom I had seen in the vision at the beginning, being caused to fly swiftly, touched me about the time of the evening oblation." The evening oblation was 3:00 p.m. and it was the time when the lamb was sacrificed in the temple. But there had been no temple for 70 years. There had been no sacrifice. Yet Daniel still kept the time. His heart was still synchronized with the rituals of God. Suddenly, the heavy silence of the room is shattered. It wasn't a wind. It wasn't an earthquake. It was a presence. Gabriel, the mighty archangel, stands before him. He is breathless, having flown from the throne room of the universe to a room in Babylon in an instant. Gabriel speaks, "O Daniel, I am now come forth to give thee skill and understanding. At the beginning of thy supplications the commandment came forth, and I am come to show thee, for thou art greatly beloved." Imagine hearing those words from an angel. Greatly beloved. In Hebrew it means desirable or precious. Heaven wasn't just tolerating Daniel. Heaven treasured him. Gabriel continues, "Therefore understand the matter and consider the vision." Daniel had been praying about 70 years. He was thinking about the restoration of Jerusalem. He was thinking about bricks and mortar. But God wanted to show him something much bigger. God was about to give him the calendar for the entire future of the Jewish people. He wasn't just going to show him when the exile would end. He was going to show him when the Messiah would come. The prophecy of the 70 weeks. Verse 24 contains the backbone of Bible prophecy. If you understand this verse, you understand the entire timeline of the Bible. If you miss this, you miss everything. 70 weeks are determined upon thy people, and upon thy holy city. The word weeks here is the Hebrew word shabuah. It literally means sevens diet. It is a unit of measure. Just as a dozen means 12, a shabuah means 7. So, the angel is saying, 77s are determined. 77s of what? Days? No. In the context of Daniel realizing the 70 years of captivity, these are 77s of years. 70 x 7, Shu, 490 years. Gabriel is telling Daniel, God has put a stopwatch on the history of Israel. The clock is set for 490 years. When those 490 years are finished, 6 things will happen. To finish the transgression, to make an end of sins, to make reconciliation for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up the vision and prophecy, to anoint the most holy. This is the ultimate goal, the end of sin, the establishment of God's eternal kingdom on earth. But when does the clock start? And when does it stop? Gabriel breaks the 490 years down into 3 specific blocks. Block 1, the commandment. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem unto the Messiah, the Prince, the clock starts ticking with a specific decree. Historically, there were several decrees, but only one fits the description of restoring and building the city. Not just the temple. This was the decree given by King Artaxerxes Longimanus to Nehemiah on March 14, 445 BC. Nehemiah, chapter 2. On that day, the cosmic stopwatch began. Gabriel says the first block is 7 weeks, 49 years. This was the time it took Nehemiah and the Jews to rebuild the walls in the city during troublous times, just as the prophecy predicted. They built with a trowel in one hand and a sword in the other. Block 2, the coming of Messiah. 62 weeks. Shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. After the first 49 years, there is a second period of 62 weeks, 434 years. Total time, 49 434, Q 4, 83 years. Gabriel is giving a precise mathematical equation. He says, count 483 years from the commandment to rebuild the walls, and you will arrive at Messiah the Prince. Now we must use the prophetic calendar. The ancient biblical year was 360 days, based on the lunar cycle, not 365. If you take 483 years and multiply it by 360 days, you get 173,880 days. Sir Robert Anderson, a brilliant investigator from Scotland Yard in the 19th century, did the math. He calculated the days from Artaxerxes' decree, March 14, 45 BC. If you count exactly 173,880 days forward, you arrive at April 6, 32 AD. What happened on April 6, 32 AD? It was the 10th of Nisan, Palm Sunday, the only day in history where Jesus Christ allowed the crowds to publicly proclaim him as king. Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord. Up until that day, Jesus had always said, "My hour is not yet come." He told people to be quiet. But on that specific day, he rode into Jerusalem on a donkey to fulfill the prophecy of Zechariah 9:9. As he came over the Mount of Olives and saw the city, he wept. In Luke 19:42, Jesus said, "If thou hadst known, even thou, at least in this thy day, the things which belong unto thy peace, but now they are hid from thine eyes. This thy day." Jesus held them accountable to know the math of Daniel chapter 9. He arrived on the exact day Gabriel predicted. The accuracy is staggering. It proves that the God of the Bible is the master of time. The tragedy, Messiah cut off. But the prophecy takes a dark turn. And after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself. He will be cut off. The Hebrew word is kereth. It means to be executed, to be killed, to be severed. It is a violent death. But not for himself. He died, but not for his own sins. He was innocent. He died for us. This is the gospel in the Old Testament. The Messiah would appear, be presented as king, and then be executed as a criminal for the sins of the world. And then the judgment falls, and the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. Because Israel rejected the king, the kingdom was postponed. Who are the people of the prince that shall come? Historically, we know who destroyed Jerusalem and the temple after Jesus died. It was the Roman armies under General Titus in 70 AD. Therefore, the people are the Romans. This implies that the prince that shall come, the Antichrist, will rise out of the Roman system. The revived Roman Empire we saw in chapter 7. The Great Gap. So far, we have accounted for 69 weeks, 483 years. But the prophecy said 70 weeks, 490 years. Where's the missing week? Where are the final 7 years? Between verse 26, the death of Jesus and the destruction of Jerusalem, and verse 27, there is a pause. A gap in time. We are living in that gap right now. It is the church age. The prophetic clock for Israel stopped ticking when they rejected their Messiah. It has been paused for nearly 2,000 years. But one day soon, the clock will start again. The 70th week, the final countdown. Verse 27 describes the final 7 years of human history before the kingdom of God. This is what the New Testament calls the Tribulation. And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. Who is he? The antecedent is the prince that shall come, the Antichrist. The final 7 years begins not with the rapture, and not with a war, but with a peace treaty. The Antichrist will emerge as a brilliant diplomat. He will solve the Middle East crisis. He will confirm a covenant, a firm treaty, with Israel and the many nations. This treaty will likely allow the Jews to rebuild their temple on the Temple Mount. The world will hail him as a savior. Peace will finally come to Jerusalem. But it is a lie. And in the midst of the week he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. In the midst of the week. Half of 7 is 3.5. After 3.5 years, the Antichrist will break the treaty. He will walk into the rebuilt Jewish temple. He will stop the sacrifices. And just like Antiochus Epiphanes did in the past, he will commit the abomination of desolation. He will declare himself to be God. 2 Thessalonians 2:4. And for the overspreading of abominations he shall make it desolate, even until the consummation, and that determined shall be poured upon the desolate. The final 3.5 years will be hell on earth. It is the time of Jacob's trouble. The Antichrist will persecute the Jewish people with the fury of Satan. But God has determined a limit. At the end of the 70th week, at the end of the 490 years, the consummation comes. What is the consummation? It is the return of the true king. The stone strikes the image. The Son of Man comes on the clouds. The transgression is finished. Everlasting righteousness is brought in. The end of the chapter. The chapter ends abruptly. Gabriel has given the outline. He has shown the cross, the destruction of Jerusalem, the Antichrist, and the end of the age. Daniel is left with his head spinning. He prayed for restoration, and God showed him the redemption of the world. He prayed for the end of the 70 years, and God showed him the 70 weeks. This chapter is the proof that God is in control of every second of history. He knows the end from the beginning. The first 69 weeks were fulfilled to the exact day. Jesus rode into Jerusalem on the donkey, right on schedule. If the first 69 weeks were literal, then the 70th week will be literal too. The clock is currently paused, but the hand is hovering over the button. The prince is coming. The treaty is coming. And the final week is about to begin. Daniel's work in the courts of Babylon is effectively over. But God has one final message for him. A vision so detailed, so complex, and so terrifying that it will take 3 full chapters to explain it. In chapter 10, the curtain is pulled back not on history, but on the spiritual warfare, behind history. We will see angels fighting demons. We will meet the Prince of Persia, and we will see why prayer is sometimes delayed. Join us next time for Chapter 10, The Spiritual War in the Heavens. This is the Book of Daniel. Chapter 10, The Spiritual War. We have now entered the final section of the Book of Daniel. We have journeyed through the rise and fall of empires. We have seen the statues of gold and the beasts of the sea. We have calculated the mathematical countdown to the Messiah. But now, the veil is ripped away completely. Chapter 10 is unlike any other chapter in the Bible. It does not focus on the visible kings of the earth, Nebuchadnezzar, Belshazzar, or Cyrus. Instead, it pulls back the curtain to reveal the invisible kings who rule the darkness. It gives us the Bible's most detailed and terrifying glimpse into the reality of spiritual warfare. It answers the question, what happens when we pray? And why are some answers delayed? The year is 536 BC, the third year of Cyrus, king of Persia. Daniel is now a very old man, likely around 85 years old. He has survived the lion's den. He has seen his people begin to return to Jerusalem under the decree of Cyrus, issued 2 years prior. But the news coming back from Jerusalem is not good. The reconstruction is stalled. The people are discouraged. There is opposition from the local tribes. The glorious restoration Daniel had prayed for in chapter 9 seems to be failing. The burden of this reality crushes the old prophet. He does not go to the king to complain. He goes to God. The fast of sorrow. In those days Daniel was mourning 3 full weeks. I ate no pleasant bread, neither came flesh nor wine in my mouth. Neither did I anoint myself at all, till 3 whole weeks were fulfilled. This is not a normal fast. Usually, a Jewish fast involves total abstinence from food for a short time. But Daniel enters a partial fast for 21 days. He eliminates the luxuries. No pleasant bread, sweets or delicacies. No meat. No wine? He stops using anointing oils, the ancient equivalent of lotion or deodorant, signifying a state of deep mourning and neglect of the physical body. Why 21 days? He was waiting. He was wrestling. He was pressing into the spirit realm until he got an answer. He knew that the problem in Jerusalem wasn't just political, it was spiritual. The vision by the river. On the 24th day of the first month, 3 days after the Passover season, Daniel is standing by the side of the great river Hiddekel, the Tigris. He is likely there with a small entourage of assistants. Suddenly, the natural world fades. Then I lifted up mine eyes, and looked, and behold a certain man clothed in linen, whose loins were girded with fine gold of Uphaz. Daniel sees a figure standing on the water or hovering above the river. The description he gives matches almost perfectly the description of the glorified Jesus Christ in Revelation chapter 1. Body like the beryl, a gem that glows with a golden yellow light. Face as the appearance of lightning, blinding, terrifying intensity. Eyes as lamps of fire, the all-seeing, burning gaze of judgment. Arms and feet like polished brass, glowing with heat and strength. Voice like the voice of a multitude, like the roar of the ocean or a massive crowd. This is a Christophany, a pre-incarnate appearance of the Son of God. It is the commander of the Lord's army appearing to his general on earth. The holiness emanating from this figure is lethal to human flesh. The reaction is immediate panic. And I, Daniel, alone saw the vision, for the men that were with me saw not the vision, but a great quaking fell upon them, so that they fled to hide themselves. The men with Daniel didn't see the figure, but they felt the atmosphere change. Their spirits reacted to the presence of the Holy One with terror. They ran for their lives, leaving the 85-year-old man alone on the riverbank. Daniel is left exposed to the raw power of the supernatural. Therefore I was left alone, and saw this great vision, and there remained no strength in me. For my comeliness was turned in me into corruption, and I retained no strength. This is the consistent reaction of men who meet God. Isaiah said, "Woe is me, for I am undone." Ezekiel fell on his face. John fell as though dead. When the finite meets the infinite, the result is total collapse. Daniel describes his comeliness, his dignity, his physical composure, turning to corruption. He felt like dust. He felt his mortality. He hears the voice of the figure, and the sound knocks him unconscious. Then was I in a deep sleep on my face, and my face toward the ground. The touch of the messenger. While Daniel is lying face down in the dirt, paralyzed by the glory of the Lord, a transition occurs. The glorious figure, the Lord, seems to step back, and a messenger, an angel, steps forward to minister to Daniel. And behold, an hand touched me, which set me upon my knees and upon the palms of my hands. The touch revives him slightly. He is trembling on all fours, unable to stand. The angel speaks, "O Daniel, a man greatly beloved, understand the words that I speak unto thee, and stand upright, for unto thee am I now sent." Greatly beloved. This is the second time Daniel hears this title. In a world of beasts and wars, heaven wants Daniel to know his status. He is loved. Slowly shaking, Daniel stands up. The explanation of the delay. Now the angel pulls back the curtain on the mystery of the 21 days. This is the theological core of the chapter. Then said he unto me, "Fear not, Daniel. For from the first day that thou didst set thine heart to understand, and to chasten thyself before thy God, thy words were heard, and I am come for thy words." This is a massive comfort. God didn't hear Daniel on day 21. He heard him on day 1. The answer was dispatched the moment Daniel started praying. God was not reluctant. He didn't need to be convinced. So, where was the angel for 3 weeks? Why the delay? But the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days. Here lies the revelation. The prince of Persia is not King Cyrus. Cyrus is a human. An angel could bypass a human in a microsecond. No human can stop an angelic messenger. This prince is a spiritual entity. It is a high-ranking fallen angel, a demon of immense power, who was assigned by Satan to control the territory of the Persian Empire. The Bible teaches a hierarchy in the kingdom of darkness. Paul speaks of principalities, powers, rulers of the darkness of this world, Ephesians 6:12. Satan is not omnipresent. He cannot be everywhere at once. So, he has a well-organized military structure. He assigns specific demonic rulers over nations, cities, and regions to influence their culture, their kings, and their decisions. There was a dark, brooding spirit over Persia. Its job was to influence Cyrus, to harden his heart against the Jews, and to stop the restoration of Jerusalem. When God sent the angel with the answer to Daniel, this demonic prince intercepted him. Imagine the scene in the second heaven, the spiritual atmosphere above the earth. A cosmic clash between a holy angel and the demonic prince. A sword fight of spiritual energy that lasted for 3 weeks. The holy angel was blocked. He was withstood. This tells us something frightening and inspiring. Prayer is a battlefield. Daniel's fasting on earth was providing the fuel for the battle in the heavens. For 21 days, Daniel refused to give up. And for 21 days, the angel refused to retreat. If Daniel had stopped praying on day 10, what would have happened? The text implies a direct correlation between the perseverance of the saint and the victory of the angel. The arrival of Michael. The stalemate was broken by a reinforcement. But, lo, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, and I remained there with the kings of Persia. Michael is the heavy artillery of heaven. He is the only angel in the Bible designated as the archangel, Jude 9. In Daniel 12 first, he is called the great prince, which standeth for the children of thy people. Michael is the specific guardian angel of the nation of Israel. Whenever the Jews are in mortal danger, Michael is deployed. When Michael arrived on the scene, the balance of power shifted. The prince of Persia was driven back. The messenger broke through the blockade and descended to the Tigris River to deliver the message to Daniel. The angel explains his mission. Now I am come to make thee understand what shall befall thy people in the latter days. For yet the vision is for many days. The weakness and the strength. Hearing about this cosmic war drains Daniel again. He looks at the ground and goes speechless. It is too much for a human mind to process. And when he had spoken such words unto me, I set my face toward the ground, and I became dumb. Once again, a supernatural touch is needed. And behold, one like the similitude of the sons of men touched my lips. This touch restores his ability to speak. Daniel confesses his weakness. O my Lord, by the vision my sorrows are turned upon me, and I have retained no strength. Neither is there breath left in me. He is gasping for air. He is having a panic attack. He feels like a worm in the presence of stars. Then comes the third touch. Then there came again and touched me one like the appearance of a man, and he strengthened me. And the angel speaks peace into his soul. O man greatly beloved, fear not, peace be unto thee, be strong, yea, be strong. The word of God infuses life. As the angel spoke, Daniel felt the strength return to his limbs. His heart rate slowed. His breathing steadied. He was ready to receive the download. Let my Lord speak, for thou hast strengthened me. The return to the fight. Before the angel delivers the prophecy of chapter 11, he reveals one more secret about the spiritual geography of the world. Knowest thou wherefore I come unto thee? And now will I return to fight with the prince of Persia. The battle wasn't over. The angel had broken through to deliver the message, but he had to go back up. The war for the mind of Cyrus and the future of the Persian Empire was still raging. And then the angel drops a prophetic bombshell. And when I am gone forth, lo, the prince of Grecia shall come. He predicts the next superpower. Just as there is a demonic prince of Persia, there is a prince of Greece. This spirit was waiting in the wings. It represented the humanism, the philosophy, the idolatry, and the intellect of the Greek culture. When Persia fell, this new spirit would take over the dominion of the earth. The angel is teaching Daniel a philosophy of history. Visible history is the result of invisible wars. Empires do not just rise and fall because of economics or battles. They rise and fall because of the shifting of spiritual powers in the heavenly places. When the prince of Persia is defeated, the Persian Empire on earth collapses. When the prince of Greece arrives, Alexander the Great rises. The angel concludes his introduction. But I will show thee that which is noted in the scripture of truth, and there is none that holdeth with me in these things, but Michael your prince. It is a lonely war. Only two high-ranking angels, this messenger, likely Gabriel, and Michael, are mentioned as being involved in this specific high-level combat against the world rulers. But they are enough, because they serve the Lord of hosts. Conclusion of chapter 10. This chapter changes the way we view the world. It teaches us that we are not just citizens of a country. We are soldiers in a cosmic conflict. When we see a nation acting in rage, or a government making laws against God, we are seeing the influence of princes and powers. It teaches us that prayer is the most powerful weapon in the universe. Daniel's prayer in Babylon authorized Michael's sword in the heavens. It teaches us that delay is not denial. God's timing is coordinated with a complex war that we cannot see. And now, having strengthened Daniel, the angel prepares to open the scripture of truth. What follows in chapter 11 is the most detailed prophecy in the entire Bible. It is so precise that skeptics have tried for centuries to prove it was written after the fact. The angel will name kings, describe battles, outline marriages, and detail assassinations that would occur over the next 400 years, the silent years between the Old and New Testaments. He will detail the wars of the roses of the ancient world, the conflict between the king of the north and the king of the south. And he will introduce us to the most terrifying villain of the Old Testament, the man who foreshadows the Antichrist. The curtain is fully open. The angel is ready to speak. Join us next time for Chapter 11, The Prophecy of the Silent Wars. This is the Book of Daniel. Chapter 11, The Silent Wars and the Man of Sin. We stand now at the precipice of the most detailed, precise, and controversial chapter in the entire Word of God. If Daniel chapter 2 gave us the skeleton of history, and chapter 7 gave us the spiritual nature of history, then chapter 11 gives us the microscopic DNA of history. We are still on the banks of the Tigris River. The year is 536 BC. The 85-year-old prophet Daniel is standing before the mighty angel who has just strengthened him. The atmosphere is electric with supernatural power. The angel has promised to show Daniel that which is noted in the scripture of truth. What follows is a prophecy so accurate that for centuries, skeptics and critics have tried to destroy it. They claim that it must have been written after the events took place, because no human being could possibly predict the future with such terrifying precision. The angel does not just predict empires. He predicts the personalities of kings, the details of political marriages, the specific outcomes of battles, and the exact methods of assassinations. He outlines a period of 400 years, the era that Bible scholars call the silent years, the time between the end of the Old Testament and the birth of Jesus Christ. God breaks the silence before it even begins. The angel begins by whispering the immediate future of the Persian Empire. Behold, there shall stand up yet 3 kings in Persia, and the 4th shall be far richer than they all. And by his strength through his riches he shall stir up all against the realm of Grecia. Remember, Cyrus is currently on the throne. The angel sees the next 3 kings, Cambyses, Smerdis, and Darius Hystaspes. But he zooms in on the 4th. This 4th king is Xerxes I, known in the book of Esther as King Ahasuerus. History tells us he was unimaginably wealthy. He amassed a massive army of over 2 million men, the largest force the ancient world had ever seen, to crush Greece. He stirred up all against the realm of Grecia. But despite his wealth and power, he failed. His defeat at the Battle of Salamis planted a seed of hatred in the hearts of the Greeks, a seed that would grow into a war of revenge 150 years later. And a mighty king shall stand up, that shall rule with great dominion. The prophecy jumps forward. The Persian ram is dead. The mighty king is Alexander the Great. The angel describes him perfectly. He rules with great dominion and does exactly what he wants. He is a force of nature. But just as we saw in chapter 8, his glory is short-lived. And when he shall stand up, his kingdom shall be broken, and shall be divided toward the 4 winds of heaven, and not to his posterity. Alexander died at the age of 32. He had a young son, Hercules, and a half-brother, Aridaeus. By all rights, the empire should have gone to his posterity, his family. But the angel said not to his posterity. History confirms that Alexander's entire bloodline was murdered within a few years of his death. His empire was not inherited. It was looted. It was divided toward the 4 winds, split among his 4 generals. Now, the camera zooms in. The angel ignores the generals in the west and the north. He focuses entirely on the 2 generals who control the destiny of Israel. The king of the south, Ptolemy, ruling Egypt. The king of the north, Seleucus, ruling Syria. For the next several hundred years, the Holy Land of Israel would become the battlefield between these 2 rival dynasties. The Jews would be the grass trampled under the feet of these 2 elephants fighting for supremacy. The angel outlines their conflicts with the detail of a soap opera. And the king of the south shall be strong, but one of his princes shall be strong above him. The intrigue begins. The angel describes a failed peace treaty that ends in tragedy. And in the end of years they shall join themselves together. For the king's daughter of the south shall come to the king of the north to make an agreement. This is the story of Berenice, the daughter of the Egyptian king Ptolemy II. In a political move to end the war, she was sent north to marry the Syrian king Antiochus II. It was a marriage of convenience. Antiochus agreed to divorce his current wife, Laodice, and disinherit her children, in order to marry the wealthy Egyptian princess. But the prophecy says, "But she shall not retain the power of the arm." The plan failed miserably. When the Egyptian king died, Antiochus decided he didn't like his new wife Berenice anymore. He took back his ex-wife, Laodice. But Laodice was a woman scorned. She didn't trust him. To secure her position, she poisoned her husband, the king. Then, she ordered the murder of Berenice, Berenice's infant son, and all her Egyptian attendants. The angel predicted every step of this bloody palace coup centuries before it happened. But out of a branch of her roots shall one stand up in his estate, which shall come with an army, and shall enter into the fortress of the king of the north. A branch of her roots refers to Berenice's brother, Ptolemy III. When he heard that his sister had been murdered in Syria, he launched a war of revenge. He invaded the north, captured the capital, and executed the murderer Laodice. He returned to Egypt carrying thousands of tons of gold and silver idols, exactly as the angel foretold. The war raged on for generations. Sons took the place of fathers. Armies swept back and forth through Judea. The angel describes a raiser of taxes, Seleucus IV, who would be destroyed mysteriously, neither in anger nor in battle. History tells us he was poisoned by his own treasurer. And then, the prophecy darkens. And in his estate shall stand up a vile person, to whom they shall not give the honor of the kingdom. But he shall come in peaceably. We have now arrived at the villain of chapter 8, the man who foreshadows the Antichrist, Antiochus IV, Epiphanes. The angel calls him a vile person. He was not the rightful heir. He seized the throne through intrigue, charm, and political manipulation. He didn't conquer the kingdom with a sword. He stole it with a smile. He obtained it by flatteries. And with the arms of a flood shall they be overflown from before him, yea, also the prince of the covenant. Antiochus was a master of deceit. He murdered the Jewish high priest, the prince of the covenant, Onias III, replacing him with a puppet who would do his bidding. He wanted to Hellenize the Jews, to turn them into Greeks, to erase the worship of Yahweh from the earth. He shall enter peaceably even upon the fattest places of the province, and he shall do that which his fathers have not done, nor his fathers' fathers. He shall scatter among them the prey, and spoil and riches. Unlike previous kings who hoarded wealth, Antiochus bought his friends. He redistributed the loot to bribe leaders and secure loyalty. He was a populist tyrant. The angel details his campaigns against Egypt, the king of the south. He would have conquered Egypt completely, but something stopped him. For the ships of Chittim shall come against him. Therefore he shall be grieved, and return, and have indignation against the Holy Covenant. Chittim refers to Cyprus, or the West. By this time, 168 BC, the Roman Empire was rising. When Antiochus marched on Egypt, a Roman fleet met him. The Roman ambassador drew a circle in the sand around Antiochus, and told him, "Before you step out of this circle, you must decide. Leave Egypt or be at war with Rome." Humiliated, Antiochus had to retreat. He was grieved. He was furious. He couldn't fight Rome, so he needed someone to take his anger out on. He turned his eyes toward Jerusalem. "And arms shall stand on his part, and they shall pollute the sanctuary of strength, and shall take away the daily sacrifice, and they shall place the abomination that maketh desolate." This is the historical fulfillment we discussed in chapter 8. Antiochus marched into Jerusalem on the Sabbath. He slaughtered thousands. He entered the temple. He stopped the daily sacrifices. He set up a statue of Zeus. He sacrificed a pig on the altar. He tried to corrupt the people. And such as do wickedly against the covenant shall he corrupt by flatteries. He offered money and power to any Jew who would forsake the law of Moses. But the people that do know their God shall be strong and do exploits. This is one of the most triumphant verses in the Bible. In the midst of this darkness, a resistance formed. The Maccabees, a family of priests who refused to bow. They were outmanned and outgunned, But they knew their God. They launched a guerrilla war against the Syrian Empire. They did exploits. They performed miracles of military strategy. They eventually recaptured the temple, cleansed it, and lit the menorah, the miracle we celebrate as Hanukkah. And they that understand among the people shall instruct many. Yet they shall fall by the sword, and by flame, by captivity, and by spoil many days. The angel warns that faithfulness comes with a price. Many of the righteous fell. They were hunted down in caves. They were burned alive. This passage serves as a bridge, reminding us that suffering is often the prelude to glory. The great leap, from history to prophecy. Up to verse 35, the prophecy tracks perfectly with ancient history. Every detail fits Antiochus Epiphanes. But starting in verse 36, the angel shifts gears. Antiochus Epiphanes fades into the background, and the ultimate vile person, the Antichrist of the end times, steps into the foreground. The camera jumps 2,000 years into the future. The lens widens. And the king shall do according to his will, and he shall exalt himself, and magnify himself, above every god, and shall speak marvelous things against the God of gods, and shall prosper till the indignation be accomplished. Antiochus was bad, but he worshipped the Greek gods. This coming king is different. He exalts himself above every god. He is the ultimate humanist, the ultimate egoist. He claims to be the only deity worthy of worship. As Paul wrote in 2 Thessalonians, he sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. Neither shall he regard the God of his fathers, nor the desire of women, nor regard any god, for he shall magnify himself above all. The desire of women is a cryptic phrase. Some scholars believe it refers to the Messiah, since every Jewish woman desired to be the mother of the Messiah. Others believe it implies this king will have no natural affection or family values. He is cold, solitary, and obsessed only with power. But in his estate shall he honor the God of forces. His only religion is power, military might, technology, the ability to control and destroy. He will spend the wealth of the world to build a war machine that no one can stand against. Thus shall he do in the most strongholds with a strange god, and he shall cause them to rule over many, and shall divide the land for gain. The Antichrist will be a master of geopolitics. He will divide the land of Israel. He will redraw the map of the Middle East. He will use land deals and peace treaties as currency to buy influence. The final war. And at the time of the end shall the king of the south push at him, and the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots, and with horsemen, and with many ships. Now we are in the Battle of Armageddon scenario. The king of the south, likely an Egyptian Islamic coalition, and the king of the north, possibly a Russian or European coalition, or simply the Antichrist's forces coming from Syria, engage in a massive global conflict. The Antichrist responds with overwhelming force. He shall enter into the countries, and shall overflow and pass over. He shall enter also into the glorious land, and many countries shall be overthrown. The glorious land is Israel. The Antichrist will break his treaty and invade Israel physically. But these shall escape out of his hand, even Edom and Moab and the chief of the children of Ammon. This is a fascinating geographic detail. Edom, Moab, and Ammon correspond to modern-day Jordan. For some reason, perhaps God preserves it as a place of refuge for the fleeing Jews. Petra. Jordan escapes the full wrath of the Antichrist. He shall have power over the treasures of gold and of silver, and over all the precious things of Egypt. The economic system of the world will fall under his control. He will seize the assets of the nations. But tidings out of the east and out of the north shall trouble him. Therefore he shall go forth with great fury to destroy, and utterly to make away many. Just when he thinks he has won, rumors of rebellion or a massive army from the east, the kings of the east mentioned in Revelation, disturb him. He launches a final genocidal campaign. He wants to wipe out the Jewish people once and for all. And he shall plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas, in the glorious holy mountain. This is the climax. Between the seas, the Dead Sea and the Mediterranean, lies Jerusalem. The glorious holy mountain is Mount Zion, the Temple Mount. The Antichrist will set up his headquarters in Jerusalem. He will sit on the very spot where David ruled, mocking the promises of God. He will declare himself the king of the world. It will look like evil has triumphed. It will look like the promises to Abraham are dead. The sudden end. But the chapter ends with 5 powerful words. Yet he shall come to his end, and none shall help him. There is no battle described here. No long struggle. Just a sudden, abrupt end. Paul tells us in 2 Thessalonians, whom the Lord shall consume with the spirit of his mouth, and shall destroy with the brightness of his coming. Revelation 19 tells us that the beast and the false prophet are cast alive into the lake of fire. At the height of his power, standing on the holy mountain, the Antichrist will be dismantled by the return of the true king. No ally will save him. No army will defend him. His gold will not bribe the judge. He will stand alone before the wrath of the Lamb. Conclusion of chapter 11. This chapter leaves Daniel, and us, breathless. It is a whirlwind tour of human depravity and God's sovereignty. It shows us that history is not random. The wars between the Ptolemies and Seleucids, the marriage of Berenice, the rise of Antiochus, the rise of Rome. It was all scripted in the scripture of truth before a single soldier marched. And if the first 35 verses happened exactly as the angel said, then the final verses about the Antichrist will happen exactly as written. We are seeing the stage being set today. The nations are aligning. The kings of the north and south are forming their alliances. The desire to divide the land of Israel for gain is on the front page of every newspaper. The world is preparing for the man of sin. But the church should be preparing for the man of salvation. The angel is not done. He has shown Daniel the political future. But Daniel still has one burning question. What about my people? What about the Jews? If the Antichrist invades Israel, will they survive? In the final chapter, chapter 12, the angel gives the ultimate assurance. He speaks of the great tribulation, the resurrection of the dead, and the final timeline of the end. He tells Daniel to seal the book until the time of the end. That time is now. Join us next time for the grand finale. Chapter 12, the time of the end and the sealing of the book. This is the book of Daniel. Chapter 12, the time of the end and the sealing of the book. We have arrived at the end of the journey. We have stood in the courts of Babylon with Nebuchadnezzar, Dartai. We have walked through the fiery furnace with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. We have deciphered the writing on the wall with Belshazzar. We have prayed in the lion's den with Darius. We have watched the march of empires, the lion, the bear, the leopard, and the terrifying beast of Rome. We have seen the Antichrist rise, and we have seen the battles of the end times. Now the 85-year-old prophet Daniel stands on the banks of the Tigris River one last time. He is exhausted. The visions of chapter 11 were brutal. He saw centuries of war, bloodshed, and the ultimate persecution of his people by the man of sin. His heart is heavy. He is wondering if there's any hope left for Israel. He is wondering if evil wins. But God does not leave his servant in the dark. In this final chapter, the angel pulls back the curtain on the ultimate victory. We are moving beyond politics. We are moving beyond history. We are moving into eternity. The angel begins by describing the darkest moment in human history, but he immediately pairs it with the greatest promise of deliverance. And at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince which standeth for the children of thy people. At that time. This refers to the end of the great tribulation, the moment when the Antichrist has set up his headquarters in Jerusalem and is preparing to wipe the Jewish people off the face of the earth. It is the moment when all hope seems lost. But then, Michael stands up. Throughout the Bible, Michael is portrayed as the warrior archangel. He is the protector of Israel. Usually, angels operate in the background, invisible and silent. But here, The language implies a visible, decisive military intervention. Michael draws his sword. The angelic hosts are mobilized. Heaven goes to war to save the remnant. Why is this intervention necessary? Because of what follows. And there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation even to that same time. This is the Great Tribulation. Jesus Christ himself quoted this exact verse in Matthew 24:21. He said, "For then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be." Think about the history of human suffering. Think about the flood of Noah. Think about the destruction of Sodom. Think about the Holocaust. Think about the world wars. The Bible says that the distress of the end times will be worse than all of them combined. It will be a time of total global collapse, political, environmental, and spiritual. It will be the wrath of Satan meeting the wrath of God. If God did not intervene, no flesh would be saved. But the promise is absolute, and at that time thy people shall be delivered, every one that shall be found written in the book. Here is the concept of the book of life. God has a registry. He knows his own. The Antichrist may have a database of everyone who took the mark of the beast, but God has a book of those who kept the faith. Not a single name will be lost. The deliverance will be physical for the Jewish remnant hiding in the wilderness, and spiritual for the believers worldwide. The resurrection of the dead. But Daniel has a deeper question. What about the righteous who die? What about the martyrs who fall by the sword? What about Daniel himself, who knows he will die soon? Is death the end? The angel delivers one of the clearest revelations of the resurrection in the entire Old Testament. And many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. To God, death is not a termination. It is a sleep. The body lies in the dust, but the person is waiting for the wake-up call. The angel describes two resurrections. First, the resurrection to everlasting life. This is the hope of every believer. To rise with a glorified body, free from pain, free from age, free from sin. Second, the resurrection to shame and everlasting contempt. This is a terrifying thought. The wicked do not just fade into nothingness. They are raised to face the reality of their rejection of God. They will exist eternally in a state of regret and separation. This shatters the ancient pagan idea that the afterlife is a shadowy gray underworld where everyone floats around as ghosts. No. The Bible teaches a vivid, physical resurrection. The dusty graves will open. The cemeteries will be emptied. And then the angel describes the reward of the faithful. And they that be wise shall shine as the brightness of the firmament, and they that turn many to righteousness as the stars forever and ever. This is the destiny of the saints. We do not just survive, we shine. In the darkest night of the tribulation, when the world is drowning in deception, those who hold to the truth, those who are wise, will stand out like blazing stars. To turn many to righteousness is the greatest calling of the believer. It is evangelism. It is discipleship. It is warning the world of the coming judgment and pointing them to the Messiah. Those who do this work will have an eternal glory that outlasts the sun. The sealing of the book. The vision is almost over. The angel gives Daniel a command that has puzzled scholars for centuries. But thou, O Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book, even to the time of the end. Daniel is told to secure the scroll. Why? Because the prophecy was not for his time. It was not for the Maccabees. It was not for the Middle Ages. It was a time capsule, encrypted and preserved for the final generation. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased. Look at our world today. This verse is the signature of the 21st century. Many shall run to and fro. For thousands of years, the speed of human travel was limited to the speed of a horse. Julius Caesar traveled at the same speed as Abraham. But in the last century, we have broken the sound barrier. We travel constantly. We fly across oceans in hours. We are a restless, mobile civilization, running to and fro across the globe. And knowledge shall be increased. Think about the explosion of information. We carry the sum of human knowledge in our pockets. The internet, artificial intelligence, medical breakthroughs, knowledge is doubling every few months. But there is a deeper meaning here. It also refers to the knowledge of prophecy. For centuries, the book of Daniel was a mystery. Men like Sir Isaac Newton studied it, but could not fully grasp it because the time was not right. But now, as we see Israel back in her land, as we see the global alignment of nations, the seal is breaking. We understand Daniel today in a way that Daniel himself could not. The book is opening. The man upon the waters. Daniel is still looking at the scene. He sees two other angels standing on the riverbank, one on this side, one on that side. They are witnesses to the solemnity of the moment. Then, one of the angels asks the question that is burning in Daniel's heart. How long shall it be to the end of these wonders? He's asking about the duration of the Great Tribulation. How long will the madness last? Daniel looks up. Hovering above the waters of the Tigris is the man clothed in linen, the pre-incarnate Christ we met in chapter 10. The man raises both his right hand and his left hand toward heaven. In a court of law, you raise one hand to swear. Here, the Lord raises both hands. He swears by him that liveth for ever and ever. He gives the definitive answer, it shall be for a time, times, and an half. We have seen this code before in chapter 7. Time, 1 year. Times, 2 years. Half, 6 months. Total, 3.5 years. 60 days. The Lord is swearing an oath to his people. I will allow the Antichrist to reign, but I have set a strict limit. He gets 42 months, not a second more. And when he shall have accomplished to scatter the power of the holy people, all these things shall be finished. This is a hard truth. The power of the holy people, Israel's self-reliance, their military strength, their ability to save themselves, must be scattered or shattered. Israel must be brought to the point where they have no allies, no weapons, and no hope, so that they finally look up and cry out, "Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." Their breaking point is their saving point. Daniel's confusion. Daniel hears the timeline, but he doesn't understand. He is an old man, weary and confused by the magnitude of what he is seeing. And I heard, but I understood not. Then said I, O my Lord, what shall be the end of these things? He isn't asking when. He's asking what. He wants to know the outcome. What happens after the time of trouble? What is the final state of the world? The response from the Lord is gentle but firm. Go thy way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed till the time of the end. It is a dismissal. It is not for you to know, Daniel. You have done your part. You have recorded the vision. Now, leave the future to me. Whatever the final outcome looked like, it was too complex, too glorious, or perhaps too terrifying to explain to a man living in 536 BC. The final purification. But the Lord gives him one last key to identify the generation of the end. Many shall be purified, and made white, and tried. But the wicked shall do wickedly. And none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand. This is the great polarization. In the end times, there will be no middle ground. The trials and tribulations will act like a refining fire. For the righteous, the fire purifies. It burns away the compromise. It makes them white. It produces a church that is spotless and faithful. For the wicked, the fire hardens. They will continue to do wickedly. They will double down on their rebellion. And the scariest part, none of the wicked shall understand. They will see the plagues, they will see the wars, they will see the signs in the sky, but they will not get it. They will rationalize it away. They will blame climate change, or aliens, or politics. They will be spiritually blind to the reality of God's judgment. Only the wise, Those who know their God and study His Word will understand what is happening. The mystery of the days. Just when we think the chapter is over, the Lord adds a postscript. He gives 2 precise countdowns that have fascinated prophecy students for 2,000 years. And from the time that the daily sacrifice shall be taken away, and the abomination that maketh desolate set up, there shall be 1,290 days. Wait. We know the tribulation is 1260 days, 3.5 years. Where do these extra 30 days come from? 1290, 1260. Bible scholars suggest that after the return of Jesus Christ at the end of the 1260 days, there will be a 30-day period of cleanup. The battle of Armageddon must be finished. The Antichrist must be judged. The nations must be gathered for the sheep and goat judgment. Matthew 25. The temple must be cleansed of the Antichrist's pollution. This takes time. Blessed is he that waiteth, and cometh to the 1,305 and 30 days. Now we have 1335 days. That is another 45 days added to the 1290. Total, 75 days after the return of Christ. Why is the person who reaches this day blessed? Because 75 days after the return of the King, the kingdom officially begins. This is likely the inauguration of the millennial temple. It is the beginning of the marriage supper of the Lamb. If you survive the tribulation, survive the judgments, and make it to day 1335, you have entered the golden age. You have entered the promised rest. The final farewell. The vision fades. The angels on the river disappear. The man in linen ascends. The roar of the water returns. Daniel is alone again in the silence of the Persian Empire. God speaks the final words of the book directly to his faithful servant. It is a benediction of peace. But go thou thy way till the end be, for thou shalt rest and stand in thy lot at the end of the days. Go thy way. Your work is done. You have fought the good fight. You have finished the race. Thou shalt rest. Daniel would soon die. He would not see the coming of the Messiah in his lifetime. He would not see the destruction of Jerusalem. He would lay his head down in death and sleep in the dust, waiting for the resurrection. And stand in thy lot at the end of the days. This is a promise. Daniel, you are not missing out. When the end comes, when Michael stands up, when the dead are raised, you will be there. You have a lot. An inheritance, a plot of land in the kingdom, a position in the government of God. You will stand again. Conclusion of this series. And so, we close the book of Daniel. We started with a teenage boy being dragged away from his home in chains, forced to serve a pagan king. We watched him draw a line in the sand over a plate of food. We watched him rise to become the prime minister of 2 world empires. We watched him stare down lions and kings. And we watched him receive the secrets of the universe from the mouth of Gabriel. Daniel's life is a testimony to one overriding truth. God is sovereign. He rules in the kingdom of men. He sets up kings and takes them down. He draws the maps. He sets the clocks. The empires of this world, the gold, the silver, the bronze, the iron, they all turn to dust. The statues crumble. The beasts die. The Antichrist falls. But the kingdom of the stone, the kingdom of the Son of Man, endures forever. The book is sealed no longer. The time is at hand. The words are open. The question is not, when will the end come? The question is, when the end comes, will you be found among the wise who understand, or among the wicked who do not? Will you shine like the stars? Will you stand in your lot at the end of the days? The God of Daniel is still on the throne, and he is coming soon. End of series.